All right, good afternoon, everyone. Today is Monday, April 17th, and I am joined by my colleagues on the County Council's Health and Human Services Committee. And we are embarking on a journey that will take us through the next several weeks as we go through what promises to be an interesting and engaging, but as usual, challenging budget process. And so I have some opening comments to make to sort of level set expectations, both logistically but also generally about what will transpire over these next several weeks. But I have supreme confidence that we will continue the longstanding tradition of this from previous councils in the seamless work of partnering with our executive branch to provide services to our public in a way that they have come to expect and demand and frankly need right now. So this budget, like every budget, is sort of like a snowflake. No two budgets are the same. This one presents its own unique sets of challenges, and especially in the areas that are we have oversight for within this particular committee. A number of the vacancies that are currently within county government are within HHS, and we of course know that a lot of the one-time federal funding that we received to provide a bridge to get us through COVID were programs that were administered by the Department of Health and Human Services, the Office of Human Rights, and a number of the other divisions of county government that report to the Health and Human Services Committee, and of course the many incredible nonprofit organizations. So we have a unique set of challenges this year that we will go through methodically, and we of course are welcoming two outstanding new members of this committee who I have been immensely impressed by and have more than just hit the ground running, but have really been able to pick things up in a manner that was frankly quicker than I ever could have had I been in their similar positions. And of course, we have once again an outstanding central staff that is providing tremendous support in a variety of different ways. So I have confidence that we will get through the next several weeks. Just to highlight, we have 3 individual HHS sessions. We have 2 joint education and culture and HHS sessions, and we have 1 joint HHS and PHP, that's Planning, Housing, and Parks, for those of you that have been tracking this for a while. And we have also left open the possibility that we will reconvene on May 4th for a 4th individual HHS session should we need it. And we might. And the reason for that, in addition to what I mentioned earlier, are the unique sets of challenges with this budget, is logistically the council is also following a new process this year that we have not, at least since I've been around. The council president determined, understandably, to tackle this budget through a slightly different lens in that our reconciliation list will include both the additional recommendations made by the county executive above and beyond the FY23 budget, in addition to the council's recommendations for any budget increases over the FY23 budget as well. That's different because normally the reconciliation list is made up of only additional items that the council adds, and decisions are made in real time about whether or not we will support additions by the county executive. Now we're going to look at all of it. And in a very condensed amount of time. And so we will work our way through. We are also, because we have a condensed amount of time, will we be looking at line item by line item and determining whether something is high priority or is priority. Now within HHS, everything is critical, based on what we've seen and felt from our public and community, and we are hearing from daily from constituents. And so we may not be able to decide right away whether something is deemed high priority or priority, and we will reserve the right to come back to all of it in the end anyways. And so I just wanted to let colleagues know that we don't have to put too much pressure on ourselves to decide right then and there about any particular line item. We will have the time to process and absorb, and I'm sure there will be many follow-up questions that will ensue. So I wanted to just provide those opening comments to level set expectations as we go into this process this year, and I'll open it up to see if any of my colleagues have any opening comments that they'd like to make generally. No? Okay, we're good. So we will move on to the first item on the agenda today, and there are 5, and that is to discuss the proposed FY24 operating budget for our friends and colleagues in the Office of Human Rights. And so I'd like to ask Director Stowe and his team, members of OMB, to come forward. And I want to thank Ms. Singleton for her continued leadership. And we'll turn this over to her as soon as we get settled in to tee this up and then walk us through the packet. Thanks. Thank you. Why don't we start with introductions? Director Stowe, hello, it's great to see you as always, sir. Could you please introduce your guests today? Or have them introduce themselves.
Well, I am delighted to have with us today. First of all, good afternoon to all of you. I trust all is well within your individual communities and households and so forth. So again, thank you for your service to this community. I'm so glad to have with us today the chairperson for the Human Rights Commission, the Honorable William England. Thank him for being here as well. And then beside him is one of our longtime commissioners as well, Commissioner Janice Freeman. So glad to have him with us as well.
Thank you very much. Ms. Singleton.
Good afternoon. And also to my left is Alicia Singh from OMB. So good afternoon, Chair Albanos, Council Members Lutke and Sales. You have before you the budget for the Office of Human Rights. The County Executive's FY24 recommended operating budget for the office totals $2,059,712, which is an increase of $423,806, or a 25.91% increase from the FY23 approved budget. The executive recommends 12.1 FTEs and 1 additional part-time employee. Personnel costs comprise 79.6% of the budget, and the operating expenses comprise the remaining 20.40%. Wanted to call your attention to, as you just indicated, Chair Albanos, everything is going on the reconciliation list, but wanted to call your attention to page 2, where we've listed high priorities and priorities from both the recommended budget changes with and without surface impacts. And then at Circle 7, you will see some discussion about what each of these means and why we are adding them here. The other thing is, as you know, that each department was required to complete an operating budget equity tool, and the rankings were from 0 stars to 3 stars. And the Office of Human Rights got a 3-star rating, which is the highest level you can receive. The department level budget demonstrates a strong commitment to advancing racial equity and social justice. And the justification for that from the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice was that the department indicated commitments across each major area of the government alliance framework and is well positioned to make meaningful impacts on redressing discrimination in the county. The office provides a complementary set of functions to the Office of Racial Equity and Social Justice, with additional resources could help accelerate the county's racial equity and social justice efforts, particularly with those with respect to community engagement. And I just want to call your attention to one more item at Circle 9, a letter from Councilmember Will Jawando supporting this budget. That is all I have for now.
Thank you very much. Director Stowe, did you want to make some opening comments?
Just simply to again thank council staff and also OMB team members as well for their support in our process getting here. You all know, Mr. Chairman, you know probably better than maybe other 2 council members, the work that we are trying to do every day throughout the year. We are in some very, very challenging times, to say the least. And so we think our work is even more important than maybe it was even previous to these challenging times, if they've ever been less challenging. And lastly, I just wanted to say then that we continue to work with what we have to work with. We are certainly supportive of the council executive's budget in this regard, and look forward then to addressing any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Stowe. I'll just say a couple of things up front, that the 19th Council was particularly aggressive in enacting legislation that falls upon the responsibility of the Office of Human Rights to administer. And while we were able to add a few positions over the last several years, we know that you are still not yet at where you were from a staffing level perspective since before the recession in fiscal year 2009. And the need, as we know, has grown. We are particularly grateful for the Commission and all of its tremendous support, and we're all intimately familiar with that support, and know it goes beyond just general support, that you are key to the success of this particular division within county government, whose need has grown so significantly these last several years in particular. We are about to embark on another what promises to be toxic presidential election cycle. We are seeing unprecedented unrest within our schools. People feel scared, they feel anxious, and your office is so important, especially now. So we really thank you, Director Stowe, for that leadership. We are going to go line item by line item as we go through the budget this year, both because it deserves it, but also it's all somewhat connected, and this is our first go at it, and so we will see how we do from here. We'll figure out the rhythm of it as we go along, but please, colleagues, let's stop at any point as Ms. Singleton walks us through the packet if you have a question or follow-up. So Ms. Singleton, I'll turn it over to you.
So on page 1, you have the recommended budget. You have personnel costs of from the recommended county executive's budget of $1,639,524, which is 11 full-time employees and 1 part-time employee, and that change is an increase of 11.7%. Mr. Chairman, when you say you want to go line by line, do you want me to stop here?
Yeah, let's stop there. Can
Okay.
you talk a little bit about those personnel needs, Dr. Stowe, what this additional position will provide, and what it will help with?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of council. We're looking for a part-time position, is what we have approved, to help with the ongoing need that I have as a director of the agency to help facilitate programming and other outreach activities that we have in place. We are finding it more and more difficult to do all the things that we believe are important to do. Some are required of us to do by statute and otherwise. And quite frankly, I can't be in every place. And so we're trying our very, very best to kind of figure out how we can best manage those areas we put priorities on, at the same time maintain what we call our staple programs, such that they are timely, that they are presented in ways that are most efficient, that we have an opportunity then to not only follow up but follow through on any commitments made as a result of programming or needs that arise, just for instance, when things just come up. And so those are the kind of things I'm looking then for this person part-time. Program manager type is what I'm looking for, that might be able to assist us with these kind of activities and be that person that, if in fact there's a need then to have a dual kind of responsibility on a given occasion, that I can in fact send someone, as it were, to make very sure then that that task gets accomplished. At the same time, if there are other planning needs that need to go on, again, simultaneous to other things that are happening out there, that I've got someone, in fact, who might be able to be skilled at doing those kinds of tasks. So that's the reason we need the person, I believe, that can best facilitate and really move the agenda much further along on the issue of community engagement.
I appreciate that. And for context, could you talk a little bit about, you're still understaffed from where you all were in FY09. This is a part-time position. Of course, you'd prefer to have several full-time positions, but could you talk a little bit about that gap, just again to provide some context?
When I came here in 2008, September 22nd to be exact, I had 23 staff. staff of persons who were dedicated to outreach and activities of that nature, 8 folks. I had 10 investigators at that point in time who were obviously engaged in investigatory kinds of activities, and then I had some program persons who made up the full complement of those persons. In 2009, we lost all but 7 positions. We stayed with 7 positions for until 2019, I want to say, or thereabouts, for the entire time. And since that time, we got just an explosion of activity coming out of this council and previous councils in the way of civil rights and human rights legislation, which obviously meant then more work, not less work. And the other thing that happened to us as well was the community changed on us, right? It went very much to a very, very, very diverse community. You may know that in the mid-1990s, we were about 70%, a little bit more than that, in terms of majority community for our area. And as I say, then 70% or a little bit more than that of whites in this community. And then the other percentage has been broken down amongst the 3 major groups here in our area. That has changed drastically. We're now with 56% then, as far as minorities are concerned. And so we've changed. And so that has also had us then to become involved in many, many more kinds of activities than we had before with no people to do them. So what our goal and objective has been then is to partner where we possibly can. That's what we've been able to do, and thank God for partners that are out there throughout the community who are doing great work as well. But realizing that when it comes down to it, there is and has to be someone accountable for those things getting done. And that's been falling on us for the most part and the kind of activities we are engaged in. So we went then from, again, 23 people. Actually, let me be clear about this. They went down to 1. That's what actually happened. It went down to 1. And then we were able then to have an opportunity then to have it back, took it up to 7, and then we stayed there, again, as I mentioned, for the majority of that period of time. So now, to all of you, we are at a point now where we're starting just a little bit, to breathe a little bit, to be able to do a little bit more in terms of the kind of things that we need to be doing in the first place. And I would say to you, in all earnestness, that if we can't get in front of some of the issues, we're always chasing. You cannot win battles chasing. You cannot really affect the community properly, in my opinion, if you're always chasing the issues. You got to get in front. And so it seems to me then that the kind of work that I would love to be able to do, and work that I thought I was going to do when I first came here, was that we should be able then to be able to anticipate, give you all as council members the advice and counsel about what we see, the county executive and members of our, again, of our administration, issues that are in their particular areas of focus. You know, we see this happening, folks. We see this occurring. We recommend this, we recommend that, what gets me in the being, but that's the roles I think that can be much improved with additional resources. So that was our then. I'm talking about our now. I hope to be talking about our future.
I appreciate that. So speaking for myself, I think this is a modest increase considering the need that has grown even in the last several years. And I'm sure you'd prefer that this be a full-time position and that there be more than just one. But I think this is a cost-effective approach given the unique set of circumstances before us, but that will add some capacity to your office, as if you've articulated. But I will yield to colleagues to see if they have questions or thoughts on this particular item. Councilmember Lutke, followed by Councilmember Sales.
So thank you for going through the history of the staff and the drop-offs and the rebuild, as it were. I had a couple questions related to, you had mentioned at one point having 10 investigators. How many of the 12 full-time employees that you currently have are investigators?
We don't have 12 full-time at this point. We just have 11.
Okay.
11 full-time persons.
Okay.
And to date, we have now a total of 6.
Okay. And then I'm looking on Circle 3 of the packet. So it shows your actual number of cases processed by year for a couple older years, and then projected for this fiscal year, because we're not quite done that, and yes. And you're projecting a same or similar amount for the next 2 years. So I just sort of want to walk through what's the life cycle of one of those cases for an investigator.
Councilman Lukey, what occurs right now is that when a case comes in, we do what we call perfecting the complaint. Mm-hmm. And as I say then, that we first find out whether or not we have jurisdictional responsibility for that case, oversight, if mm-hmm. as it were. And once that process goes through, then you may remember your days at the state's attorney's office, you kind of go through the whole process of kind of pulling all that together. We come back then and make then a judgment that it is in fact within our jurisdiction. That is part of our intake process I'm describing at this point. And then once we do that, we then do actual docketing, as it were, of that case. It now becomes our case. We have a number assigned to it. And then next we go then to assigning it to an investigator.
Okay.
And then one of the things that we try very hard to do in the very beginning of that whole sort of time frame is to recommend, or at least to offer mediation. You know, not been able to do as much mediation as we've done in the past because of, again, the effects of COVID.
Right.
But before we had a very robust, again, mediation program. And we're doing about 50% success rate for those that actually got into mediation. But with that not being as much of a tool right now as it was before, that case then goes into the actual investigatory process itself. And that is to say that we notify then the respondent, the person to whom has been alleged to have committed the particular infraction. A response comes back, and then the person to whom again has actually filed a complaint has a chance to respond back to that. We call that the rebuttal. And then it's investigation, back and forth, as you might imagine, until we have sufficient information that either verifies that that person's case and the allegation does have some merit, or it does not. If it does not, of course, we render a no cause finding. If it does, we in fact then go further with our conciliation process. Respondent, we believe that this happened. We're giving you an opportunity now to see if we can't resolve this issue through settlement and other kind of activities. If that fails, then the cause finding is issued, and at that point in time, the individuals can appeal the process. If the complainant feels that they've not been given a fair opportunity for that case to be addressed. They can in fact ask for that appeal process, and then our commissioners come in as a part of that process to in fact hear that particular appeal process. Is that more?
Yes.
Okay.
I did want to ask, especially since Councilmember Jawando raised in his letter that was in the packet.
Yes.
You know, and I'm looking at the program performance measures from the budget book, and trying to discern whether the ban the box complaints for housing or employment discrimination are part of these human rights compliance cases, or are they separate and tracked elsewhere?
They are part, but I'll be very honest with you, we've only had a few.
Okay.
And I will say this to you, that one of the issues that we are trying to propose in our request is to do more outreach to this particular community.
Okay.
Ban the box is really that requirement of employers. Well, you need to go through all that, but the point is that with that being in place, the audience, those who may be victims to this, are the most difficult folks, in fact, to reach and get them actively involved in understanding their rights. Because many of them, again, are coming out of jails, they're coming out of prisons, returning back to their homes and communities, and trying to re-engage themselves into the work world. And so they've been told that they need to go ahead and self-identify that they, in fact, have been incarcerated. But that's not the case in Montgomery County. As a matter of fact, that question should not be even on the application at all.
Right.
And so I think one of the things we want to do is, again, continue to work this. And talking to my colleagues at the Department of Correction and Rehabilitation, is this issue of, if you really want to impact that community, it's going to take at least 3 to 5 years to really get them understanding what their rights are, and more important, to act upon those rights. So our current caseload, as it exists today, may have 1 or 2 inquiries about that particular issue of ban the box.
So since 2020 is when the county passed its local law, but there is also the state law on the same topic, and I wasn't sure, how many fines have you actually had to levy during that time?
We have not levied any fines at this point in time. And I should tell you too, Council Member Lukey, that you may recall that the difference between the state and also the county was an issue of when questions about, again, your particular record could be asked. Right. And we said before, after the first interview got started. But now we changed our law to make sure that it says that after the initial actual offer has been made.
Yes, a conditional
and
offer.
that was a difference that we had to reach here in the county.
Yeah, and actually, as I understand it, and on the state employee forms, they are that way. The form is given after you've had a conditional offer of employment, which is copacetic with Montgomery County.
Now it is.
So I just wondered, had you collaborated with the State Department of Labor et al. To find out how many cases they are taking that are related to Montgomery County as opposed to those being funneled through your entity?
I have not, to be honest with you about that. I will tell you that we've constantly been working with our department locally of correctional rehabilitation about, again, how to reach folks. And one of the things in their program that also is you know, we kind of talked through this a little bit. Their reentry program obviously works with individuals who already are aware, employers, that we've got persons returning to the work world who have come through their system. So they're already aware that they in fact have criminal records. And so it's a little bit of a challenge there as far as that goes in terms of people then being able to let us know that I've had a bad experience. It's when they go outside of that employment pool that sometimes that we hear that that question was on an application of such. But again, people sometimes do not follow through.
Right. Okay. Okay. Let me just double check my notes. There's other stuff I wanted to ask you. I think that was it for this particular item.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales.
So, you know, I'm very familiar with the important work that happens with the Office of Human Rights, and so I understand having to manage this large county, needing a surrogate is very reasonable in your position. I've seen you at so many events, whether it's hosting or covering a meeting, so I see I'm supportive of the recommendation for the part-time staff. I do want to make sure that, you know, the programs that we are asking for more resources to support, that we ensure that there's a return on the investment for, you know, the events that we're hosting. And so I'm hoping that in addition to this person being a surrogate and having the programmatic skills, that they'll be able to assist with the evaluation of some of these increased investments that I see are high priorities. And Councilmember Lukey mentioned the Ban the Box program, and so, you know, if there's resources that are needed to increase awareness, I know that I've already sent over recommendations about the technical innovations that we can use with just having one of those pop-ups on the Office of Human Rights website, so that if anyone is wrong, they can just go to that electronic site, fill out a form, and start the process. And a lot of people don't even know that that law is, you know, a requirement and that they have this vehicle. We're working with marginalized communities who aren't aware of their rights, like you said, recently released, and who are already going to face barriers trying to find affordable housing. And so any way that we can work with your office to make sure that that language is easily accessible and people have more access to understanding their rights and making those complaints. But I thought that was a really good point to see if there are any cases that have been referred to the state, because our residents don't know. And I think the increased investment to raise awareness, make sure that this is available in many languages as well, so that residents, and also holding our landlords accountable. I don't know if there's any reporting that the landlords have to do where they have to disclose how many disapprovals that they provide, because I think it should be a shared responsibility. We need to make sure we're able to hold them accountable as well. And if there's a time that they're in conflict with a resident complaining and, you know, the landlord saying that he followed procedure, it's best that we have documentation on both sides. So any recommendations that you have to come up with for how this will be better implemented so we can support those efforts, please advise. So that's all I have. I yield. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just another highlight and I'll think of these as we go along here, but obviously the salary compensation adjustments are included as new. Those are going to be taken up beginning in GO overall, and so we won't be discussing those individual compensation adjustments within each department before the committees, because we have to look at them as an entire package for all of county government. So they're on our list, but I just wanted to give that headline. I think for time purposes, it might make sense, Ms. Singleton, for you to go through the next three, and then we can pause and discuss each of them after you've gone through three. That's all my brain can handle at once. My colleagues probably can handle more, but let's do three at a time.
Okay. So the next set is the operating costs, and the county executive is recommending $420,188, which is a change of 149.4%. And if you turn to page 2, the service impacts, the first three, are an additional $70,000 for the Juneteenth and Dr. Martin Luther King celebrations, $56,000 for the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission, and that $56,000 was deferred from last year till January of 2023 of this year. And then the addition of $53,160, well, we just talked about that, so maybe I can skip that one.
Yeah, we can skip.
Okay. And then $40,000 for hosting the Human Rights Agency conference, which is a one-time request.
Thank you. Let's pause there. So for the Juneteenth event, this is a product of unfinished business. So this came up at the 11th hour in the last budget process, and there was comments made by the previous council to see if the administration would be able to absorb some of those costs, those special event costs within the fiscal year. And of course, that's a challenge, to say the least. It's a fair amount of resources. And these events are important for so many different reasons. And we've all been impressed with the production value of these particular events. But could you talk a little bit, Director Stowe, about, generally speaking, their importance and why $70,000 for these events, and just give us a little bit more background? That would be helpful.
Mr. Chairman and members of council, we have tried very, very hard, particularly starting with our Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Event. We just really believe it's important to have an event that is, first of all, I think, representative of Montgomery County, representative of those of us who believe that this is a significant event, and I think that's the majority of our community. At the same time, wanting to make very sure that every year we teach, we share knowledge, we pass on a story. We want people to leave there not only with having seen, quote, a wonderful performance of X, but rather, I did not know that. I now see the importance of that. I now want to go back now and apply what I've learned as a result of having gone through this program. And I must say, to have had our past program with all 6 of our brand new council members, all of which were female, was a significant statement I think we made to our community. And I think that it was illustrative of the progress that I think that we continue to make in our community as well. And so I think it's really important that we do that. Now, where we do that is always a challenge because, again, the venue also brings with it certain kinds of requirements. We don't get charged a fee for the rental of Strathmore as an example, but there are hard costs, costs for which will always be the case. It is a union house. We support that, obviously, that being the case. But those are costs along with other things that will not be able to be, again, absorbed by, again, an entity that is a revenue kind of entity in of itself, the Strathmore. And so those are the kind of things we've got to always account for. And then we're at a point now where you cannot continue to ask folks to volunteer, to do something for nothing. You just cannot continue to do that. And expect then something in return that might be, again, representative of their gifts and their talents and their involvement. And so we don't do anything lavish with anybody at all. But what we try to do, though, is to, again, show deference to the fact that they, in fact, are professionals who are part of our community. Some of them go a little beyond that. But the idea is that it ought to be the kind of event that, again, represents excellence in what we do and how, in fact, we do it for our community. And so that's why we are where we are in terms of the cost of that particular event itself. Then we moved into Juneteenth. Juneteenth, for many of us in this community, represents a chance to really focus in on not only the end of slavery in the slave states as a result of the Emancipation Proclamation, but rather a rebirth of who we are in this community. We have nearly 200,000 black folks here in Montgomery County. And so there is a need then to make sure that people not only are aware of that, but also the rich cultural diversity within that black community, the rich art expressions that are in that community as well, education and music. It goes on and on and on, and we don't really have a platform by which that kind of representation of our black community can be shown. And here's the big part of all this. It's not just a community that looks at us from a standpoint of being black in this community. It's all of our involvement. It's all of our history that we're really talking about. We just happen to be a slice of it that we're looking at that point in time. And so it just seems to me then that we want to make real sure we do credit for that. Now again, going back to the venue again, we try to utilize county venues. Strathmore is also county funded. And so is Black Rock Center for the Arts. It's up in Up County, by the way. And Up County often feels like everything happens in other places other than Up County. And so we believe we brought something to that part of the county that allows them to be part of what's going on culturally. It's a wonderful facility that Black Rock is. And so we try to, in fact, but again, it operates on the revenue that it produces. And so therefore we have to pay for that venue as well. And so those are the kind of things we're talking about. We try to bring in, again, every aspect of our community and, again, acknowledge them as well. And so to do a quality event, we believe that what we've asked for is reasonable. It's not crazy, not rid out of line, we don't think, for what we're talking about. But at the same time, we recognize people who are very important. And I will share with you that I have had the privilege, I should say, of learning about what we call our African American living legends, where we recognize individuals 75 years young in our community who have done a lifetime of investments, not only of their own goods and talents and services, but also as residents of our community as well, as civic leaders of our community as well. And so that's a big part of this event as well. So all those things happen to come to play for that event. So I believe, and I would hope then, we've got your full support for those two events.
Thank you, and I forgot to note earlier, without objection, we'll support the part-time staff recommendation as being high priority as recommended by council staff. So colleagues, do you have questions about this, these next batch of line items?
I have a question.
Yes,
It's not,
Councilmember Leakey.
well, it's not necessarily directly about any of the programs. It's more about, I'm new. So last year, the funding, there wasn't funding allocated, but then funding was taken from one source to move for something else. And so that's something that is unique or somewhat concerning for me, right? That if we are allocating for certain things, and I wasn't part of the we that was there before, but that then if we make decisions based on certain things and then money gets shifted around in different ways that we didn't anticipate or we didn't bless, I'm sort of grappling with how that actually should work here in the county, just because we are such a big county. And I know, for example, at the state, like, you can't take personnel dollars allocated in an agency budget, in an executive agency budget for personnel, and move them to something else within that agency's budget. But that doesn't seem to be the case here. And so do you know how that works, or how that worked out last year to make sure that you got the events taken care of?
I'll defer to
Good afternoon. Alicia Singh, Office of Management and Budget. So each department has a percentage that is allotted that does not require council approval, where they can transfer a certain amount. I believe that the threshold is 10%. So the Office of Human Rights had some savings due to vacancies. So we were able to transfer some of that savings on, so Director Stoke could provide those events.
Okay. Super. Thank you. That is hugely helpful in understanding, because I'm trying to make sense of all this. did you, now it's been so long, I can't remember if you had referenced the $40,000 for the conference. Was that in this initial batch that we talked about? Okay. So could you explain, I know it says it's a one-time request, so could you talk to us about what that is or what that $40,000 is anticipated to cover?
Yes, let me just share too with you. The International Association of Official Human Rights Agencies is the oldest organization of its kind in the country, dedicated to, again, trying to be that association, if you will, for those of us who are in the civil rights field, directors and also commission members. Began, as I mentioned, back in 1949, and I am pleased to have served as the president of the organization a couple of times. One of the things that we do every year then is to host a training event, training conference for our membership. Last year, Los Angeles County hosted us in Los Angeles last year. And before that, city of Orlando, Florida hosted us. So we go around the country in this regard. We were asked then to host this year. We put in our request for that purpose and got the consent of our county executive in support of that. What this will do is it will actually help fund some of the activities of the conference. Last year, I happened to be also on the planning committee of this event, so I have an idea about the monies and how they're spent, and more importantly, the kinds of resources that communities receive as a result of them being in their area, their city. We're going to turn somewhere between $600,000 to $700,000 in return to communities over the life of our conference, which is 5.5 days, by the way. So in our hotel, in our communities, spending money, etc. And we'll have about 300 or so conferees who will come along with family members, because we're in a very unique area this year where they can take advantage of the DC, DMV area and do some family kind of things as well. So we anticipate even more than that coming to our community. So the activities that we include will be then paying for speakers, paying for some of the actual activities themselves. We want them to see Montgomery County, and so we're hoping then to have something constructive where they can actually be out in our communities and see how we do things here in Montgomery County as well. And so those are the kind of things that we're hoping then to be able to help underwrite. In addition to that, we're also hoping to get some support from the general community about what we're doing as well.
Oh, super. No, that totally explains why it's a one-time, why it was put in as a one-time expense, because it's our turn, which is a great thing. So thank you for explaining that.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll just say a couple things about special events. I of course, my old role at the rec department, ran a lot of them, and I think this is a reasonable amount given all the effort that goes into these types of activities. And there's a lot of in-kind support that is provided for and doesn't show up cleanly in anyone's budgets, but are necessary in order to make these events successful. So I think maybe without objection, we support the staff recommendations then for this most recent batch as a high priority.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the last three So the last three are the Community Reinvestment Act initiative of $40,000, the Ban the Box in particular for $40,000, and an increase of $2,500 for the Biennial Hall of Fame event.
Director Stowe, you want to talk about those?
Sure, sir. I'm going to just say potentially a missed opportunity for us. The Community Reinvestment Act, a requirement of federal law that all related institutions have a plan of action by which they are reinvesting in the communities where they are located, such then that there are actual results that are an actual benefit of that involvement. That plan, by the way, is for public review. You should be able to go in your own bank, and I would just encourage the three of you to do that and ask your bank for their CRA plan. But that plan should spell out exactly what it is that they're doing to reinvest in their community. We have not heretofore, at least I speak for our office, have not heretofore really looked at those plans. We don't know what we could do to leverage those resources to do a number of things and fund a number of things here in our county as it relates then to, again, improvements in communities. We are not aware of any direct involvement with lending institutions and communities directly where they are in fact coming up with what those plans should be. And so as a result of that, we're not aware then how the impact might not only be, again, measured, but even realized by those communities. And so what this proposes to do is, we've already done, by the way, some initial looking at this issue through a grant that we got from an outside organization to look at some of the things that are impacting us. And so we took a look already at some of the lending institutions here in the county and have found some very interesting things about what they're doing relative to their community reinvestment plan. We want to dig further into that and bring in our third party to further do the analysis now with what they have found out in some of the raw data that now is available. What that will allow us to do then is to see if there are opportunities. First of all, to see whether or not people are being compliant. One can certainly put together a plan and not have any intent to follow through or in fact to implement that plan. I'm not suggesting that it's happening at all, but I'm suggesting that we need to find out whether it is or not. And then the second thing I think is important in that particular situation would be then to figure out whether or not the intended results were realized by those communities. And can we in fact see the benefit real time for those communities? And if we can't, what is the response from those lending institutions in terms of how they might in fact renew their commitment if that in fact is what it is? And so these monies then would be requested then to in fact help us dig deeper, if you will, to retain again our third party for yet another round of this, looking at additional lending institutions as well, but trying to figure out again whether or not those plans really do what they said they could do. Now, what could that possibly in fact impact long term? Can you imagine if the dollars that are out there with every lending institution was somehow or another brought to bear on some of the problems we're trying to fund, with challenges with our funding process as it is, what it could do? And then maybe they're already doing things that are being helpful, but with some county dollars, could it not in fact be, again, improved and heightened in terms of its overall impact? So those are kind of things that we hope this will be able to help us to do, right? The other thing I think I would share with you is that we are actually required to work in the area of lending as far as the fair housing law is concerned for Montgomery County. And so this will be our entree into that area going forward.
Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm looking forward to seeing what information is captured. It was one of my earlier questions I was going to ask, but I saw that this was coming up. How do we measure the return on the investment, and to work with our financial institutions to this small pot of money to really maximize the return on investment, to ensure that our businesses are getting their fair share and they're better able to provide, support and services to our community. Going through the budget in this way shows the expansive work that the Office of Human Rights covers, and how much savings we can actually see when we fully realize the recommendations. So I'm really excited to see what we learn through this budget line item, and what sort of plan we can use to continually try to raise the bar and maximize the goals that we want to result from this investment. So, no question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
So I just, knowing that the Community Reinvestment Act is a federal law, and that all the banks are regulated federally, and that there are 3 entities federally who oversee whether this act is working, not working, engage in the rulemaking. So it's the FDIC, the FRB, and the Office of, OCC, Office of Comptroller of the Currency.
Yes.
Right. So, while I don't disagree that this is a noble goal to make sure things are functioning well, right? The question is it your entity's responsibility to do that? Does someone else already have that responsibility? How should that work? Is that something you should be taking on independently, or is that something where you should be referring individuals who have complaints to the feds who actually oversee that and have the compliance authority for that. So could you speak to that a little bit?
Yes, Councilman Luque. I would just say to you that the agencies that you talked about have the overall responsibility of receiving the information and documenting the information that actually occurs. The groundwork, however, is the responsibility of the local entities. In fact, to effect the plans, in fact, to monitor those plans and to also see whether or not they meet the goals of the given communities. The NCRC is the organization that is in fact in place. It is a not-for-profit organization that does some of the groundwork, and you may know then that anytime that a bank merges with another bank, particularly national banks, it is not any of the issues that you just talked about that does any of that work. It is NCRC that's made up again of a number of, again, not-for-profits all across the United States who do that work locally. And they've been really tasked with trying to come up with the national policies around some of those, in fact, mergers that occur that led to some enormously just high dollar kinds of investment by large banking institutions. And so they then peel that down to the local level and then asking those local folks then to figure out how that best works for your individual community, because again, the Fed's not involved in that process at all. And so I think one of the things that we, again, and I want to make sure that you all hear what I'm saying, this is an opportunity. This is not a thing that may be good to do. I'm suggesting that if we do it well, there are dollars out there that can be invested in our programs here locally that we have not, we have not leveraged in doing so.
Right. But I mean, what I'm asking is then, you know, if there are federal funds that are available, for example, through the External Outreach and Minority Affairs Division of the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which they are educating organizations about their mission, and you know, and FDIC has their own, and FRB has their own. If there are all these other because that is the authoritative body or bodies for this particular issue, and they have outreach entities particularly to deal with that, is that something where you could be getting grant funding from federal entities in order to do the local work here in the community?
Let me say that I've got a good friend who, as a matter of fact, has that role that you just described. And I think that they are already at the 30,000-foot level of looking at some of these issues, even with how they're looking at it from the standpoint of education outreach. Again, what happens at the local level is really becoming a local involvement piece. And here's the opportunity I would suggest. And again, we certainly look at that, by the way, and see if those dollars are available. I'm not aware, but we certainly look at those. But I think the real opportunity, though, is with the local bank who has, they say, dedicated, $5 million for their CRA program. Where is the $5 million? We don't know. We don't know. And so my whole point is that what we can do now by our involvement with this, and again, I'm talking about a third party doing this now, who is also trained in this particular work, to help us then look at those things and identify. We're looking for partners about it. We're not looking to beat anybody up. This is not what this is about. We're trying to find a partner out there in one of our lending institutions who has then that $5 million, as my example, and to see whether or not we can leverage that into $10 million. New homes, new business opportunities, economic development, all those things are a part of the process. I think that's what we're talking about. And so those are the kind of things that the federal government does not get involved in at all. It's just not at the level at which they would get involved. But at the lowest level that we're talking about, local level, provides opportunities that we just have not heretofore been able to take advantage of. And the thing I would say to you is that we've got example after example of cities who are doing this work, and they are having just tremendous results because they are focused in on doing this. A lot of communities are not.
So the 10-week program that you've put in the budget, it says it's for a 10-week program for minority businesses.
No.
That's not what the $40,000 is for?
No. As I mentioned, the $40,000 would be for a third party coming in doing the analysis and a deeper dive.
So it would be to contract with a third party provider.
That's correct.
Not the third party person you just mentioned, though, right?
When a provider, well, let me make sure, let me try to be clear if I can. I apologize for being confusing. The ask in the budget is for a third party that might help us do that initial, in this case, furthering
Okay.
the analysis on some of the data we've already gathered within some of the lending institutions today.
Okay.
First thing.
Okay.
The two part of that would be then to expand that circle to include additional lending institutions to, in fact, to be included in that analysis. And then to bring back from that work some recommendations and some suggestions as to how we might then be able to pursue those plans that either are inadequate, those plans that are in place that may in fact be, again, an opportunity for leveraging. And the third thing is that maybe it's an opportunity for folks who maybe were not taking this maybe as seriously as they should, and we would be there then to help recommend opportunities for that particular lending institution to get involved.
Okay.
The program that you mentioned is very, very different. As a matter of fact, on that program, we just had a graduation today. Very different program of businesses. And what we did in that instance is that utilizing this law we're talking about, by the way, made inquiries to a lending institution about what they were doing. And so the response came back, well, we're trying to do this, this, and this. Well, you're not being very successful because my understanding is that you're not getting the kind of traction, particularly within the black community, that you should be getting. And as a result of that particular activity and that conversation back and forth, in good faith, I should tell you, the bank, and we worked together with them, came up with a plan, in fact, to re-engage black businesses in various communities across the county and try to see whether or not it was the banking relationship that was suffering, that did not exist, that they in fact could not build upon, that was causing the problem for black people not coming into the bank, black businesses specifically, emerging businesses specifically. And so it was in that give and take that we came back and we were able then, the bank took great leadership in this, along with our own business development team, business advancement team is called now, within county government. And they did create a curriculum that looked at some of these issues as to why black businesses were not doing business with banks in Montgomery County. And so as a result of that, this curriculum was developed and we began an initial pilot program. It didn't cost the county any money. It was just my time. But beyond that, it was others involved. We had a volunteer core of folks from the community involved as well. But primarily, it was the bank, M&T Bank to be exact. And so as a result of that whole program, to date, we've had nearly 300 businesses that have gone through this 10-week intensive program that you talked about a minute ago.
Okay.
So very different from what I'm asking for here, but I did want you to know that program is live and well, and we had 43 people who, quote, graduated this morning.
Great. No, that's great. I just wanted to make sure I understood what the ask was for prospectively, and clearly I confused that with the program that just wrapped up today. But so that would be a $40,000 procurement for a contractor, and would have to go out to bid, and you'd have to put out an RFP and all the many
that's
things.
correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember.
All right. We did discuss ban the box earlier, but if you want to follow up or elaborate on anything, Director Stone.
I think that our intent there is to make real sure that we work harder on getting the word out to this community. I think Councilman Sills was very accurate in looking at that in terms of this being a very difficult community to be aware that this even exists. And so we'll be doing again another campaign. These folks tend to ride our buses, and so Ride On will be one of the places we'll go for some help in getting the word out and trying to find places where this community already is frequenting. And when I say this community, we talk about, again, those who've been recently incarcerated. We talk about people who may have had a record, by the way, that may not have been one for which has happened in the last 10 years. Maybe something old happened that may still be out there in their record someplace. They may be impacted as well. On the side involving housing, the intent at that point in time, and adding that to the list by council, you may remember Councilmember Albanos, was also include, and Council President Glass was really focused in on this piece, was those who were homeless. As you may know then, that most persons who happen to be homeless, and I say most, and I sometimes don't like to generalize about anything, but I'll say it that way, have had a run-in at some point in time with the criminal justice system. It may be something minor, and oftentimes it's something very, very minor, but nonetheless a record gets created. And therefore sometimes they eliminate themselves from consideration for that apartment or that housing opportunity just by virtue of having that criminal record. And so this is supposed to then to eliminate that by not having that question being asked in that initial interview for someone seeking housing. And so again, if you don't know what it is that your rights, as it were, it's very difficult to exercise those rights. And so the job will be trying to do this, continue to do that. But again, I share with you, there's no panacea here in terms of getting the word out. You got to keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it.
I appreciate that. So of these two items, I again, personally don't have an objection. I'll just say to Councilmember Sales' point and Councilmember Lukey's, these are, we should revisit these a year from now and see how we're doing and track whether we were able to leverage some of these resources in a way that brought in additional revenue in some way to the county, or that we are being able to track success through the additional outreach efforts. Events, those are hard to measure, so I don't know that we necessarily need to hold you to the, how many people participated versus 1 year or the next. We all have the opportunity to go to those events, so I think we can see firsthand. But I see Councilmember Lukey wants to make a comment.
Yeah, no, I was just waiting for you to ask what our preference was.
Yes, preference is, would we like to go with the staff recommendation for high priority for both the 40,000 ban the box and then 40,000 for the Community Reinvestment Act initiative, or would we like to have one or both be moved down to priorities versus high priority? My preference is that they both stay in high priority, but I'm one of three, and I will yield to colleagues to make comments.
My preference is to move them down to the priority list.
Okay, Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Council Chairman. My priority is to support the recommended high priorities. Was there?
So so the two we're talking about are the 40,000 for ban the box and 40,000 for the Community Reinvestment Act initiative.
Yes.
So you're okay with high priority for both of those?
Definitely.
Okay, so that's 2-1, high priority, and these are, we can revisit these, you know, as we go through, but certainly understand and appreciate the comments and feedback thus far. What's next?
So the last two, there is the $56,000 for the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission that was deferred last year until January of this year. And then the last one is the Biennial Hall of Fame event for $2,500.
And I see the 2,500 was recommended as priority versus high priority. I concur with that recommendation. It's not a lot of money, but Director Stowe, anything you'd like to say about the biennial event?
Mr. Chairman, members of council, it is a recognition of our community. I think it is, if one had to put your highest recognition that we would give, it would be this particular designation as a member of the Human Rights Hall of Fame. We would invite you to go to our website and see who persons are in that Hall of Fame. And I don't know that anybody would argue with anybody who happens to be in that group of fine folks. We do this only every other year. And so what we do is on the year that we are planning for the event, we have some funds that are needed to help us hold space, hold services, etc., as it were. And so that's why the money is there. And it allows us to do that and make really sure we get then those services locked in for our event. Mm-hmm. And so this is not anything new we've been doing over the last several years as we do this again on the off year. And so this will actually occur, the event will actually occur again in 24, as in the calendar year 24.
Thank you, I appreciate that. That's helpful. I love that feedback, but I'm still in the same place, going with staff recommendation versus priority for high priority, and I think without objection. And the second one, can you remind me?
This is, again, created by council. This is the Remembrance and Reconciliation Commission. It recognizes, again, that 3 lynchings took place here in Montgomery County. Those monies are being set aside for the purpose of trying to find ways to educate, outreach to the community on those 3 horrific events that took place here in Montgomery County. And I think it's always important to talk about this in terms of Again, in Poolsville, Mr. George Peck. Here in Montgomery County, Mr. Sidney Randolph, and also Mr. John Diggs Dorsey. We want to always say the names and not just have it be a reference, but rather say the names of those persons, so we clearly understand the nature that they were human beings who had a presence and lives were taken so valiantly by members of this community.
Thank you. Councilmember Sales.
So I was able to attend the Remembrance and Reconciliation program last year, and also the installation, the art installation that took place at the Silver Spring Civic Center. And I think it's just a very important reminder of art in public places and the historical significance and a sense of community. And it was so nice to see the diversity of faces at both events. And so I did want to mention that the not the reconciliation event, but the I lost my train of thought now. The Reconciliation Commission? Yes,
Yep.
the commission. Just wanted to support, I believe it's the last, where's my,
Is this the 56,000?
yes, the 56,000.
Okay, so you're in
Okay.
favor of keeping it high priority?
Yes.
Okay. I am too. Councilmember Lukey?
Oh, I'm sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Now I remember my train of thought. As we are remembering those lynchings that took place, I know that we also have our historically Black communities, and as a human rights organization, as we're thinking about housing and how we can better use those communities as learning experiences as well. How are we thinking about building upon, the remembrance and reconciliation work that happens? And so looking forward to learning more ways that we can leverage the work of this office and using our community as a reference point. So that's what I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll just follow up very quickly. That's a great idea. And when we redid those community centers at the time, there was an event planned to remember and reflect, but it was a one-time event. And so it would be great to revisit and see how we can institutionalize that. It's a great idea. Councilmember Lukey.
Since I don't have anything to ask, I was going to just ask if we could proceed with following the recommendations that were provided to keep the Reconciliation Commission line item in high priority, and for the other event, the $2,500 event, to stay on the priority list as recommended in the packet.
Concur. I
All right.
agree.
All right, so that's unanimous on those two.
Great, thank you.
And anything else?
Nope, that's all.
Okay. All right, that was easy. So Director Stowe, thank you for your continued leadership and dedication. If we have any follow-up questions, we of course will let you know. Keep up the great work, sir. We look forward to seeing you in the community. Thank you.
Thank you all very, very much for
And
your
thank you to the members of the commission for being here as well. We appreciate
Thank
you.
you for your service.
All right, next we move on to the second item on the agenda, which is Health and Human Services. And we begin with overview and administration. All right, as we get started, Councilmember Lukey just reminded me, she's absolutely right, that there is a third option, high priority, priority, or not recommended for funding. And that is certainly, there's a chance for that as we go through and have to make some difficult decisions. I want to thank the members of the Health and Human Services team that are here, as well as their colleagues from OMB. Dr. Bridgers, you've been in this position several months. I know you've had to hit the ground running, and we've obviously had even more transition with some changes at the top, but you tend to hit curveballs well. You've gotten many of them, and we do appreciate that leadership. So I will turn it over to Dr. Bridgers, to make some opening comments before turning it over to the team to give us an overview on how they laid out this packet. So, Dr. Bridgers.
Good afternoon, and thank you, HHS Chair Albornoz, Councilmember Lukey, Councilmember Sales, for your excellent work in ensuring equity, access, and inclusion of services for Montgomery County. And just for the record, I've been in this position for 2 months and 12 days. This is my first budget cycle as the acting director for the Department of Health and Human Services, and I know it comes at a period of transition, as you illustrated. My aim is to ensure equitable access to our services across and within HHS. More importantly, federal dollars supported many of the services we provided to the committee during community during COVID relief. Nevertheless, we're reaching a point where the COVID pandemic is transitioning to an endemic phase. But the impact of the pandemic and its fiscal impacts will linger for quite some time. And this is reflected in the executive's proposed budget for the department. 3 weeks ago, you yourself, HHS committee chair, joined me and our HHS team as Maryland's Department of Human Services Secretary Lopez visited our Germantown offices. The Secretary challenged us to think of customer-focused solutions that can foster service delivery excellence within our programs. Now, what does that mean? That means utilizing data and letting it drive our work to build upon the better health and human services outcomes we establish with our multicultural and community-based partners. The excellent news is that the department has a wealth of data that direct our person-centered services. These data will also allow us to see inputs and determine better outcomes through an equity lens. This information can assist in gauging how fiscal impacts will support our somatic, mental health, and housing stabilization services administered throughout Montgomery County. I believe this budget does an excellent job of considering key factors that make up our current reality. The first is to provide a budget that prioritizes our services during a transition period of fiscal constraints. Secondly, it recognizes service areas and programs where we are transitioning off of federal and state reliance and its funds that require additional financial support. And lastly, we want to emphasize person-centered strategies that will be funded using data analysis to strengthen our return on investments. Budget challenges will continue to exist as we have urgent work to do by recruiting psychiatrists, clinicians, social workers, and nurses, because these roles are much needed to impact our community's mental and physical health care needs. Over the past 3 years, we have learned much about successfully serving the public in this new role and this environment. We have also learned that we are adaptable and resilient, and we know that we succeed as a department when we work with our partners on this committee and this council. And I always like to say, we will get there together. Thank you, and we look forward to working with you in this and future budget sessions.
Thank you. We appreciate that. And just know we're going to ask a lot of questions today, and we're going to dig in this and all of our sessions, but we're doing our jobs. But none of us in any way diminish the work, diminish the needs that are growing. We just have to do our best in our fiscal and oversight role, but everything is a priority. Everything is a high priority to some degree. It's just we've got to work through this process, and it's not an easy one. But with that, I will yield it to you, Ms. McGuire and Ms. Clemens-Johnson, to kind of give us an overview of the next few sessions, and then we'll dig in from there.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is the beginning, as you said earlier, of a long journey for the HHS committee, long journey in a short period of time. So we do begin our review of the DHHS, Department of Health and Human Services budget today. On the first page of your packet, we've outlined our approach. We have broken up the review largely by service area, although certainly there are a number of service areas that cross over each other, and so the organization is laid here, as well as a number of service areas that the committee will discuss jointly with other committees. You have 2 work sessions with the Education and Culture Committee to discuss a number of services that are joint with educational and MCPS issues, and then also having a joint session with the Planning, Housing, and Parks Committee around rental assistance and some of the other housing support issues that again form a network together with programs under the jurisdiction of that committee. So this is the beginning. And with that, I will dive into an overview of the DHHS budget. The county executive's FY24 operating budget for DHHS is an increase of $44.9 million, or 11.24% above the FY23 level. Of this increase, $39 million is in the county general fund and $9.8 million is in the grant fund. There's an increase of 86 full-time equivalent positions recommended for DHHS as well. And so we're going to present some overview information about the department as a whole and about service areas in macro here. But then what we will do is return to those data points as we go through each service area so that we can dive into them more there. And the table that you have on page 2 of your packet just outlines the relative increases among the service areas in the department. The largest increases are in services to end and prevent homelessness and in public health. I want to take a moment on the top of page 3 of your packet to discuss, as Councilmember Alvarez was describing earlier, Council President Glass's approach to the FY24 operating budget. Certainly with a budget of the size and scale of DHHS, this is going to be an interesting exercise for us, but I think it will really give the committee an opportunity to look, and the council subsequently, at all of the potential additions together and in a holistic, comprehensive way, which I'm sure is the intent. So we will again be going through all of the executive's recommended changes as well as any changes that the committee may put forward, and we will again break those up by service area. So what you'll see for each service area, council staff will take the first stab, the first approach, I should say, at identifying the changes and identifying whether they are in the high priority or priority tier. Certainly, again, we intend for that to be a starting point for the conversation, really just, again, wanting to give the committee something to have in front of you and something to react to. When we are looking at how to characterize whether something is a priority or a high priority, as Councilmember Albornoz said, these are all high priorities and all difficult choices. I think some of the things that we'll be looking at are really the full context of resources available in certain areas, perhaps a multi-year look at resources in terms of what last year's funding may have been and how that may impact this year. Again, whether there are other resources to bear from outside entities or in the community. Certainly looking at that full context, and also looking at revenues and whether an item has a revenue impact on the department's overall budget as well. So those are, again, some of the criteria, understanding that, again, this will just be an exercise that we all work through together. And ultimately, our intent is to put together, again, a framework for the committee to work from. I do understand that I believe the chair's intent is that the committee, as we go through each service area, identify again your relative support for that item, whether there are any changes that you want to recommend. At the end, once you've gone through all the service areas, we'll bring back to you sort of the full schema, if we can, of what your recommendations have been, and that will allow you to look at your priority and high priority designations in a full context together, rather than having to remember how they connect across multiple days when you're doing so many things. So I'm going to pause there because I said a lot, just to see if there's anything that you wanted to add to that as a framework.
No, that was a good overview. I would just say, in addition to the thoughts that have gone into the staff recommendations and high priority versus priority, context is important, and this is also, we're also looking at these programs in terms of service area needs, whether the program or service is being taken into account in another way, previous budgets. So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not a direct science to our public at home, because there are some who may be frustrated or maybe even offended that they think their program it should be listed a high priority, but is not. And so we will work our way through, but I wanted to underscore that. So why don't we begin with this first batch, and we'll see how it goes, figure out the rhythm of this, and we may have to make adjustments as necessary as we go through, but let's get started and see how it feels.
Thank you. So just continuing in some of the macro issues, the budget does include for DHHS a racial equity and social justice statement, as every department and agency has provided. We wanted to just highlight here briefly that the department provided a summary of the impacts of their elements, and that summary is reproduced for you in your packet. The department's tool for the Racial Equity and Social Justice Office this year did not include, at least that we are aware of, did not include a service area by service area breakdown. That may be a more granular look that the committee is interested in taking over the coming year and in working that through with the department. Certainly we know that so much of what the department does really speaks to this core value and this core mission. I think that, over the coming months, it may be something where we want to sort of work through understanding that intentionally and understanding that from a documentation standpoint. Again, those were just sort of our comments on the overarching information that was provided.
Thank you. And then just, are vacancies next? Is that the next item?
Almost.
Almost, okay.
Moving on to, we did want to highlight the federal funding and emergency response related to ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act. Certainly DHHS is an area where a great deal of ARPA funding came through. And so what we have highlighted on the bottom of page 4 of your packet relates to the changes in ARPA funding for FY24. What you'll see here are again a number of decreases, and in each of these areas all or part of that funding has been recommended to be replaced by county general funds to continue again all or part of that effort. And certainly the largest area, in fact the only area of ARPA funding remaining in DHHS for FY24 is the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, ERAP, which will continue some of, again, the federal housing efforts that we have had in place. Each of these, again, we will bring up as they are relevant in their particular service areas, but did want to portray for you here sort of the ARPA picture all together in one place.
I appreciate that. I did have a couple questions on this. So I had the opportunity to run into Chief Administrative Officer Madalino recently, and he mentioned that there was another round of FEMA reimbursements that were being requested by the administration. I don't know if OMB or someone is in a position to speak to how or if any of that, should we be successful, would impact the FY24 budget projections.
We'll have to get back to you on that. I don't have that information at the ready.
Okay, got it.
I think that there
is that item 4?
So I think that there is, as I believe Councilmember Lutke is indicating, there's a supplemental that's also before the committee today. That is item 4, and that supplemental is for FY23 current year expenditures related to COVID funding and to COVID funding that went beyond the identified budget amount that was in the FY23 budget. Our understanding is that the executive branch does intend to seek FEMA reimbursement for some or all of those funds. Again, I don't know that we have specific clarity, as Ms. Lambert was indicating on the particulars on that, although we can come back to that in that item. I do think too that the issue, as you're highlighting, Mr. Albornoz, in terms of the issue of FEMA reimbursements and federal funding is still a macro budget issue. The council had an ARPA update recently, and again, pardon me, those pieces do sort of continue to percolate their way through. Reimbursements, I believe, are a continuing process, and so that, I believe, and OMB may want to help me, but I believe that that is, again, sort of an overarching process that affects the macro revenues, and then again would be the expenditures continue to be reflected in the departments.
Bumby, did you have anything you want to add? Good.
I'm getting a thumbs up from OMB. I think I'm
great.
okay.
All right, good job, Essie. I'll just note also something to flag, and is very much out of our control, but still directly impacts operations. There are community-based organizations and nonprofit that received ARPA funding, but not through the county or through the state. And so we are learning that there are budget deficits faced by organizations who already have contracts with the county to be able to carry out critical services that aren't just losing funding from the county's portion of ARPA, but from other sources as well, which is deepening their own challenges in meeting the needs that continue to emerge across the county. It's hard to track what that is specifically, but it is related to service delivery. So I just wanted to make that point. All right,
Okay.
and again, we're just doing a general overview
Still in
here.
the overview. Thank
and then
you.
we'll dig into the items in the next item on the agenda, but let's keep going.
So I'm on the top of page 5 of your packet. We did want to just highlight for you, again, hearkening back to the discussion we had regarding the reconciliation list. There are some required changes in the FY24 budget, and this is true of every department. There are some things that are just required to continue business, and one of them, for example, is the annualization of compensation and personnel changes that were made last year. We certainly have already committed to that, and we're going to be carrying those forward into this year. Other examples are in this chart for you on the top of page 5. Some technical adjustments, motor pools, some of them are a decrease. Again, really just wanted to highlight briefly that these are areas that council staff suggests are necessary, again, just for continuity of operations, and therefore do not need to go onto the reconciliation list. That brings us to department vacancies. One of the overarching issues that the council has expressed interest in discussing this year in the 24 budget are the high number of vacancies being experienced in some departments, and certainly DHHS is one of those departments. What we have, OMB, our executive partners, have provided us with a snapshot in time of a vacancy report from March of this year. And certainly, again, it is a snapshot in time. Hiring continues to move. I just want to make a couple of comments about this, and then I know we'll pause. DHHS does have the second highest county department in terms of the number of vacancies. DHHS has 246 vacant positions, and the total dollar value of those positions is almost $21 million. Again, what we've captured here is really just the rough ballpark of the salary equivalents of those positions. We've also, on the table on page 5, broken that out by service area, and you'll see that the largest, the service areas experiencing the highest number of vacancies are Children, Youth, and Family Services and Public Health. And I just would comment that these are typically, and again, in each of these we will continue to give more breakout when we get to the service areas. But I do just want to highlight that these are in positions that we typically have ongoing hiring issues with, primarily social workers and school health nurses. A lot of those direct frontline services are ongoing conversations that we have around recruitment and retention, and certainly they are also exacerbated in the current environment for the reasons that, again, we've been talking about for a number of years. So I think that we just wanted to highlight that the conversation of vacancies in the department, even though it's a very large number and a large dollar number, many of these are positions where there's turnover to the point where things are always moving through. Also, it's just a larger conversation, I think, too, and one that we can continue to have with our partners and look at over the coming year. What is our actual staffing plan for these critical mission areas? How can we support the department in its efforts, even as we continue to struggle through the hiring challenges that are affecting the overall environment? As a result of the high vacancies, the executive branch did take additional lapse assumptions. So they assumed a higher level of personnel savings across all of the departments, and in DHHS that's just over $3 million in addition to the regular lapse assumptions. So OMB has taken some acknowledgement of savings in the 24 budget, again recognizing the hiring environment that we're in. We will, again, as we go through the service areas, give more detail about the positions that are vacant, the length of time that they've been vacant. But again, just wanted to comment globally that there are a number of dynamics, certainly in a department as big as DHHS, and that some of these areas may require a longer conversation after the budget. I'll pause there.
Thank you, for sure. It will be important to note how many of these positions have been vacant for multiple years versus just one. The turnover is very understandable given the current environment that we are in, but the Transportation and Environment Committee had their session this morning, and there were several positions that had been vacant for 6 years. Now that's an apples and oranges comparison, and we have to dig in deeper as we go through. And I'll also note that the work continues, but for the staff that are there now, when you consider how many vacant positions exist, that work hasn't gone away. It's had to be absorbed by people who are currently there. And so we will need to follow up shortly after this budget process is over to talk about the hiring and recruitment plan and whether, for example, it makes more sense to look at salary and compensation versus the number of key positions to see if there's a way that we can retain folks that we currently have more effectively than we are today. Because it costs money to train people over and over and over again, and that transition itself has a cost that isn't always clearly documented. So, Dr. Bridgers, I'm going to ask you to make some just general opening comments about the vacancies. I know the department is working hard to fill them, but your thoughts for now, sir.
Thank you, Council Chair Alvarez. So the department has worked very hard to address the vacancies and the gaps, and in my opening comments I indicated that we need psychiatrists, we need clinicians, we need nurses. So what has the department done? We've worked with Ms. Anderson and the Office of Human Resources. We've attended local recruitment job fairs at local universities, Shady Grove, Montgomery College, Washington Adventist, Johns Hopkins School, Bloomberg School of Public Health, University of Maryland, just to name a few. We've also planned to host virtual job fairs to recruit folks. And so, as you indicated, the vacancies have been filled. For the past 3 years, we've had these vacancies, not some going that long, but we've backfilled them with brokers. And so we've had temporary staff, but the training continues, the staff turnover continue. We've also been hit post-COVID, or as we transition out of the height of the pandemic, is we had high staff turnovers. And so we're looking at the nurses and folks' retirement. And so we're looking at not only those recruitment strategies, but internship pipelines to get folks in, to look at the workforce adequacy analysis in the county to determine folks who may be eligible and to get them in, to lessen the amount that we will pay as an agency, as a county, as a government for training. And so those are some of the immediate strategies come to mind. I know Mr. Rondell has a breakdown of all those staffing vacancies and the numbers, but we've worked very diligently to reduce those numbers just in the past first quarter of the year, and it will continue, and it will require more conversation and input from this committee and from this council. So I'll stop there and ask Mr. Rondell just to add to a little more context to that.
Yeah, when we get to specific service areas, we can talk about definite context, but there has been a lot of movement. We'll talk about A&D in a minute, but there's 22 vacancies on the list. As of now, 10 of those have already been filled, 3 already have a candidate selected, and 7 are in the interview process. So it's moving along, the filling of vacancies, pretty well. I'll just note a couple things. One, when the total amount for the department's listed, it's all of the anyway tax-supported vacancies. That means that we had a lot of positions, particularly in House Bill, where they're 90% grant funded, they're 10% general fund. The total value of that position is listed here. So our lapse savings is not $20 million, would not turn out to be. It would be significantly less than that. Also, as Dr. Bridgers mentioned, we do backfill a lot of our positions with contractors, whether it's through their broker, whether it's through other different temporary staffing uses, because the work still goes on. We can't not do the work. We can't not have nurses in schools or not have social workers doing the work that they need to do. And so that does lessen the amount of savings we actually have from it, because we have to, at some cases, the contractual staff actually cost more than the merit staff. And so that we are, as Dr. Bridge said, really working to fill the positions. The vacancy list has been extremely high, but it has been coming down consistently through the hard work of our HR staff as well as the Department of Human Resources in the county.
Colleagues would like to make comments. I've got Councilmember Seals, followed by Councilmember Lukey.
So thank you for that overview. I wanted to find out about the positions that have had the vacancies. It sounds like you filled almost a quarter of them, or in the process. How many?
I can run the total. I really did it. I can tell you for each of the 2 service areas we're talking about today. I haven't looked at the whole one.
Okay.
We are working on pulling all of that information, but it's a constant. Obviously, when I say we filled them, doesn't mean there's not more vacancies that have come, in the last couple of weeks. But it is a regular. We are regularly hiring and filling the positions. Certain service areas or positions are harder than others to fill, obviously.
And so what are you finding are the, I guess, barriers to filling the positions? Are you finding that applicants are getting vetted, they're making it to the interview and the salary isn't correct, or their qualifications don't match once they've gone through the interview process? Like, where do you find the biggest breakdown in recruitment-wise?
So there's a lot of factors that impact the recruiting. I would say some of it is, we go through the full process, and by the time we select a candidate and reach out to them, they've already taken another position, because obviously they're getting competition from private and other other jurisdictions for these jobs. Sometimes it is salary. Sometimes it is just it's a lot of vacancies. That just a workload of filling them and going through the process does take time. And sometimes it feels as if we're, we do all this work and we're having just as many people retire, to match the amount of positions we filled. And so that can be part of the challenge as well. Some of the positions are hard to find positions. The other area where we do have some challenges we have a lot of grant positions, and they are by definition term positions. And with the competitive job market, even though, as we know, most of our grant positions, they continue year after year after year, so they might be term, but they're really, the people, we try to tell them you're not going away after the end of the year. When they can choose between a position that's a permanent position or a term position, they a lot of times can choose not to take the term position. So that's the other area where we can have challenges in filling positions.
So of these, 86 positions, or out of the positions, how many are specifically related to new legislation versus just general needs of services?
Of the positions being high. So it is a mix. I can get you the exact breakdown.
Okay.
There's a couple. There's new legislation. There's a chunk of positions that are us converting contractual employees that have been long time, or converting contractual positions that have been contractual positions for a long time, working side by side merit employees, converting those to merit positions.
Yeah.
And then there are some that are recognizing one-time only positions that went away that we're intending to continue. Like in the newcomer shop, all those positions technically went away because they were one-time only funded this year. So when they show up for next year, they show up as new positions for next year, even though it would be the same position continuing. So there is a mix, but I can get you, we can get you a breakdown of the different new positions and what category they sort of fit in.
Okay. Okay, because it sounds like we have very limited capacity to fill all of these positions that are being requested or recommended in the budget. I'm just wondering, from when someone applies, what would be the, I guess, average wait time for onboarding someone?
That's good.
Past the application.
So one of the things that was done by OMB this year, working with them, is recognizing that challenge that we're not going to have 56 positions or 84 positions and, you know, fill them all immediately. Is normally when we request new positions, they lapse them for 3 months, assuming it's going to take 3 months to hire. For all of the HHS positions, we've lapsed them for 6 months. Just recognizing that it does right now on average take about 6 months, because it's just there's so much different stuff going on with other positions. That doesn't mean we're waiting for 6 months to start filling them. Some of them hopefully will be filled sooner than within 6 months. It's just us recognizing that on average probably the positions will take about 6 months to fill. So that's what amount of lapse is assumed for all of the new positions, the truly new positions, not the ones that are sort of continuing from last year in a different way.
Okay. And then I guess, you know, some of these positions have been vacant for 2 years. How are we, I don't know if it's reassessing because the work is still getting done, but are we rewriting the job descriptions and someone else is doing this job, or how are we, I guess, reassessing the needs as time goes on?
Yeah, that's a good question. So each different position that's more than 2 years vacant has a different story to it to some extent. I know in A&D there was, I think, 6 positions listed. Of those, right now 4 are filled. 1 we had a candidate and 1 we're interviewing for. So we're getting through them. And there's different reasons for those long-term vacancies. When it does need to be reassessed, we are doing that. There has been a lot of looking at, is there anything we can do, and doing just trying to do creative things to fill positions as needed. A lot of those positions we are backfilling with contractual staff. We don't want to have contractual staff backfilling for years a position, but sometimes we do have to prioritize positions that we can't backfill as easily to get hired over. Well, I wouldn't say that. We also do group hiring of these positions, so we do try to prioritize hiring and filling them as much as we can. Okay. So we there's just a list of different positions we got to go through to lots of steps we can go through to fill positions. But the 2-year-old positions, we can talk individually in the service areas about them. I think we can really speak to them more clearly than general. But the other thing, that I wanted to state on them, several of them are grant-filled positions. And so grant-filled positions, sometimes there can be, the grant is going through a transition. So we keep the position vacant for a little while until we figure out what's going on the grant, and then we refill it again. And that can be some of the reason for a position being vacant for 2 years. But there's, out of all of our positions, I don't think we had many of them that were 2 years or longer positions out of the total. Yeah, 13 of them, so.
Okay. And then just one last question. Because we kind of can anticipate the types of jobs that we're having, are there any discussions or workforce development programs with the Montgomery College or MCPS to start creating a pipeline for the types of positions that we know we're going to need, school health nurses and the other regularly needed positions?
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Sells, for that. The short answer is yes. We began those conversations last year, and we've looked at also the job classification. So, for example, in some service areas, we work with McGill to determine whether or not a registered nurse is required or a licensed practicing nurse is required. So just looking at the classification, we have the health room techs that are there, but looking at the requirements based on COMAR to see whether or not we need one class or one type versus another. We've also looked at mentoring programs, and we've had conversations about training and what the job actually looks like, as well as community health workers. We know that many community health workers have the applied and lived experience, and so we're looking in those areas as well to try to get the type of workforce in our HHS or under our HHS service areas that really speak to the needs of the community. So yes, we are doing that, and it is a ongoing process. So we're really looking at also language barriers to see if we need to increase any of the job classifications to have multi or bilingual individuals involved in that. And that may take a little time, but it's in response to a specific need in the community, especially if it's centered around substance use disorder, mental health, behavioral health challenges, because again, we want our workforce to look and be integrated in the community and needs to represent the community.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
Thank you. So now we're talking about COVID grant funds, other grant funds that are just the funds that come to fill the positions. And I mean, you know, I have a ton of concerns about the difference between the intention of the emergency relief funds and the expectation that everything will be maintained status quo as it was in emergency posture, because that's not what emergency federal funding is for. And while we had a great many problems that predated the pandemic and the pandemic exacerbated them, we're now in a new phase and we have to move forward in that new phase. And you know, I've said it before and I'll say it again, grant funding shouldn't be used for funding ongoing operational costs. They should be, as you said, termed, right? Termed positions for, so I know many of the nonprofits that end up with contracts with HHS find themselves in a bit of that position where they have taken grant funding or funding that was coming to them and used it to fund ongoing operational expenses. And, you know, unfortunately, that's just not what grant funding is for. So that puts everybody in a very difficult position. But because of the financial landscape that we're in, I am looking for, you know, this didn't come up in the last discussion because it's a very small entity, but for your organization, and I know Dr. Bridgers has been taking a good hard look in his brief time he's been here just so far, trying to figure out what exists, what are our needs moving forward, because everybody in the middle time, in the COVID time, as I call it, was putting the fires out and doing what they could to keep things afloat. But that's not where we are right now. That's not what the federal government expects of us right now. And, you know, I know it's been a short time since Dr. Bridgers has been here, and then thrown right directly into budget season is not much fun. I feel your pain, Dr. Bridgers, I feel your pain. But we have to take affirmative steps, and we need our agencies to partner with us in doing that, in taking a good hard look at what's real and what's necessary and what isn't. And so, for example, in our information that we have before us, we can't tell which vacancies are grant funded versus not grant funded. We need to know that. And it's important to know what type of grant funded it, whether it was in fact emergency funding or whether it was something which is, because some of the grants are a little more ongoing, right? Like Department of Homeland Security funds certain things all the time in the public safety, world, legal world. The same is true within Health and Human Services, but we can't tell any of that from what's before us right now, and we need to know that. And then with respect to the number of temp staff you have and contractual staff, obviously, you know, there are certain requirements or regulations that have to be followed. Contractual positions cost more. They just do. Every government entity that ever has to have contractors in place ends up paying more for them than they do for an FTE. But I think it would be very helpful for us to know by segment within HHS how many contractors there are in there and what the total cost is versus what the FTE budget cost would be. And then really asking you all to take a look at how many of those, because you've got 246 vacancies and a request for 86 new positions. And something's got to give in the middle of all that, right? And you know, I'm not the boots on the ground at HHS, you all are. So my request is for you all to come back later, when you do get to come back to us in a couple weeks, with a deep dive, hard look at where you can make those cuts, where those positions really aren't necessary and haven't been filled in a long time. You know, knowing the attrition rate versus which are somebody's here now, they're going to retire in 6 months. We're going to fill that position because that is one we need to keep, versus those which have been vacant for an extended period of time and we're not filling. And we may like to, but they're not there now, and how we can reclassify. And then taking into consideration what I asked during the last session, which was how much leeway you have on moving dollars around right now. You know, in a budget of this size, if you're allowed to move 10% of the HHS budget without the council's permission, and we're funding for all the vacant positions plus 86 new ones, that's a lot of dollars that can be moved around to other stuff that really isn't personnel. And I have deep concerns about that in terms of my responsibility to the taxpayers and my responsibility to, you know, I want to make sure this work is getting done. I know you all do too, but But we have to be extremely cautious and extremely careful about that and making sure we have the appropriate guardrails up, because that's what the public expects us to do. So if you could speak to that, and I've had a burning question about one position that had been for a clinician that had been assigned to MCPD and has been vacant for quite a while. And now we have a clinician working on crisis response assigned to Rockville City PD, but not to our own department. We assigned a person out to a different entity, and I wanted to know why that was, especially given that we know how many vacancies we have within behavioral health and crisis.
Great. The last question, we'll have to get back to you on it. Our behavioral health chief is not here. He would probably know better on it. I will say we did receive the request from council staff for the full list of positions and their funding source, and so we will be providing that shortly. I do want to do a couple of points of clarification with it. While we do have a lapse that the department has to meet that's based in our budget besides the additional money that's added. When we looked at our budget this year during second quarter, we're doing third quarter projections now, but during second quarter, we did project quite a bit of PC savings as we would expect. We projected almost the exact same amount of OE overage for contractual staff that were backfilling it. So our actual savings in terms of us providing staffing was zero, just about, which shows that there's not, while there is a lot of vacant positions, it's not vacant positions that we can do away with. You know, the ones that are being held vacant are generally are unintentionally, but there's a level like set that we need to make our lapse that's there. Besides that, we are essentially operating at full steam or using all of the dollars for staffing that we have in order to maintain the services that we are expected to provide. And so that is what we're doing. So like I said, we can give you the detail on the grant funding breakdown of all the positions in the county. We'll provide that to the council staff this week.
I think it would be helpful if we knew what the dollar item was that you were going to allocate or potentially to be allocated to contractual workers.
Yeah, we can. So
because to me it should be fixed at that amount. Like, this is the bucket you have to work with. This is the allocation you were given in your budget for contractual services, and that's it. And if you needed more on contractual services, you'd have to come back and ask for it. And if not, and you were going to pull it from other personnel that was vacant or lapsing, you know, that's something we need. I feel like we need to know more of rather than once a year during this budget cycle, because again, our budget is larger. We have more people in this county than in some states, right? We have a very large budget. And so there's a lot of potential for things to be happening and not as much oversight by us as we should be doing. So I would, in the ideal world, the contractual dollar amounts that any agency could spend would be capped and agreed upon as a part of the budget approval process, and not to be deviated from without a supplemental request. So.
Thank you. So a couple of follow-ups. So one, to Councilmember Sales' point, and in her line of questions, was very reasonable to follow up with strategy, and so we will have sort of a deep dive in that strategy, thinking through multi-years, what's working, what's not working, what more do we need to do. And to Councilmember Lukey's point, you know, as she pointed out, this obviously is going to be challenging. You know, these are more than just words on a page. You know, these are salaries, these are people, these are assignments. This is work that is significant and that has grown in a variety of different ways. Now, the good news is that the silver lining coming out of COVID is we were able to establish a new innovative approach to service delivery that goes beyond just DHHS's ability to be able to carry out services. We leverage partners in ways that we never have before. The challenge is we've built it and they are continuing to come. And so how do we stop short of continuing to carry out these critical services and programs that we know are having an impact? And if we stop those programs, what could the impact be if those families no longer have those resources available? Will it cost us actually more in the long run to be able to deliver services and really fray our safety net? So these are tough questions with no easy answers. And we obviously have a lot to work through, but I very much respect and appreciate the framework from which Councilmember Lukey has laid out how she will be envisioning the lens she will be looking at, which is similar to all of our lenses, but we obviously do have to take into account the service impact in a variety of different ways. And that's not always easy to measure in HHS. In fact, it's mostly not easy to measure in HHS because the impact of a program or service sometimes isn't seen until 3, 4, 5 years down the line. And so it's hard to, equate 1 + 1 always equaling 2 within the human service delivery construct. But we're going to do our best to do that as we work our way through. I just want to do a quick time check. So obviously we're way behind. That is not a surprise. I just candidly have a hard stop at 5:30, and we were scheduled to go until 4:30. I just checked with Councilmember Sales. I don't want to put Councilmember Lukey on the spot, but are you available to go to 5:30? Okay. We will take a break before the next group, just a 5-minute recess, 10 maybe, to use the restroom, get a glass of water, stretch. But just wanted to frame that. We'll go as far as we can until 5:30, and this may mean some things have to carry over into the next session, but we've tried to build in as much time as possible. So why don't we keep going, Ms. McGuire?
So then that does conclude the overview. And so we would be ready to shift to the administration service area. My question then, your comment about a break, I wasn't sure when you wanted to take that. There are 2 service areas left in this packet. One is administration and one is aging and disability.
We'll go through this next one and then we'll take a break after that.
Thank you.
So that moves us on to the next item on the agenda, which is number 3.
No, I'm sorry. We're still in the same packet, but we are moving
Got
into
it.
the administration service area, which begins on page 6 of your packet. And my colleague, Ms. Clemens Johnson, will take us through the administration area.
Perfect.
Good afternoon. So we'll get started. So for the administration service area, we did include the chart as we referenced in the beginning of our session. So these are what the staff has identified as high priority and priority. As I go through each of the sections, I'll just do it so we don't have to, so I'll just reference what's in the chart. So the first item A, would be the administration vacancies. We just had a detailed conversation about that, but particularly in administration, there are 14 vacancies totaling 1.4 million. Of those vacancies, only 2 are over 1 year old. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions. Okay. So the next item would be the inflationary adjustment to eligible nonprofit contracts, a total of 3.74 million recommended. Staff has labeled this as a priority item. So this, of course, provides an adjustment to eligible nonprofit contracts and other contracts in the base budget of DHHS. And typically the recommendations that are come out of the HHS committee for the nonprofit contracts, inflationary adjustment for the nonprofit contracts translates to the other departments as well for contracts that meet the same eligibility criteria. So for FY24, the county executive has recommended a 3% inflationary adjustment. This 3% was calculated based on the consumer price index over the last 24 months has been approximately 11%. Combining that with the 8% that the nonprofit contractors received in FY23, there is a recommendation for 3% for FY24 for a total of 11% over 2 years. So staff is recommending support for the inflationary amount of 3%, and we will, yes, that's our recommendation.
Thank you.
Yes.
This one might take a little bit of time. So just for context, last year the county executive proposed a 4% increase and the county council doubled that to 8%. And we did that for a couple of reasons. One, obviously it was pretty straightforward that there was need across the board, but we did that rather than, in some instances, enhance certain individual line items with the thought that this is sort of raising all boats because it's increasing all contracts. Now there's varying degrees of contracts. There's larger ones and smaller ones, but the thought was that this would be helpful across the board. This still does not keep in line with the inflation that many of our nonprofits are seeing because they are also having their own challenges and struggles with recruitment and retention of staff. their administrative expenditures have gone up, and they also have to train their social workers, their case managers, and they have to go through sometimes an accreditation process in order for them to be able to bring on staff. So while I support the county executive, just speaking for myself, while I support the county executive's recommendation, I do think, and I'm not prepared to make a proposal right now, but I would ask that staff go back and look at Nonprofit Montgomery and some of the other organizations, convening organizations, have made their own series of recommendations here across the board in sectors. Would love to evaluate that and speak to whether there's a possibility we may need to go above the 3.5. And so that's something I at least want to explore. Again, I wanted to have this conversation before putting a formal proposal together, but want to at least explore that further. I'll yield to colleagues. I've got Councilmember Lukey, followed by Councilmember Sales.
No, just you're not going to have us take a
Not
vote on
right
this.
now.
Okay.
Yep. Or well, the 3.5 we can.
It's
but
3.
This would be
Just-
three.
yeah,
Three.
3.
Sorry, 3. What I'm talking about would be in addition to that, but I don't have any proposal before us right now.
So, I mean, if I would move to approve the 3% recommended in the budget and as council staff has placed in the packet, and leave it at that.
Great. Councilmember Sales.
Yeah, so I actually had a question about the additional 3%. Is there an option to put the additional 3% requested by the nonprofits on the reconciliation list?
Certainly. So the again, the executive has recommended 3%
Yes.
under the council president's guidance that will be on the reconciliation list. If the committee wants to add any number of percents,
Okay.
1, 2, or 3, or whatever amount you would like, then that could also go on the reconciliation list. And the two amounts would be, we're going to be tracking those in terms of where they originated from. So our understanding is that certain nonprofits have requested 6%, as you're indicating, so that additional dollars could go on now, or as Councilmember Alvarez indicated, could also bring that back at a different time.
Oh, okay. I'm open to bringing that back, but I know that next year's structure is going to change with funding availability and how we're reviewing nonprofit applications and availability.
I think that's a different process, though. I think this is for contracts with the agency as opposed to grant making to nonprofits. Is that right? Or help me understand, because I may be wrong.
No, I believe, so I'm not to presume too much of what Councilmember Sales is asking, but the grants office process is that, I believe, maybe what you're referring to in terms of process. That is separate, and that would be for sort of more grants that are typically how we think of grants as more episodic or for a specific purpose. This inflationary adjustment does go to nonprofits who have a direct service contract with the county, and there is not, without the inflationary adjustment, there is typically not a mechanism by which to provide an increase in the contract. So if you have a contract for multiple years and an increase isn't built in, then this would be a way to, again, provide an increase to reflect inflation or other cost pressures. But it is an ongoing service contract, and so in that respect, the process, I believe, is anticipated to be the same.
Okay, thank you for that.
Thank you. I'll also note there was an additional amendment that it extended beyond the contractors with contracts with HHS, and so all other departments.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but yes, that has been the council's practice has been absolutely, as you said, DHHS has the bulk of these eligible contracts, but not all of them, and so typically what we have done, and we do have from OMB the base amount of the executive's recommendation that is in each department. And the council's practice has been to apply whatever decision is made about the inflationary contract to all eligible contracts across the government, or across the county rather, regardless of what area they're in.
Thank you. So I think without objection, we support the staff recommendation of the county executive's proposal for 3% on high priority, and we'll revisit whether there's anything we want to add to that.
Okay, great. Next, item B is the community grants shifting to the base budget. This has been a process that's been happening kind of annually with some of the community grants. So not on the priority list, but we did want to note that the 7 grants that are shifting total $326,000, and there's a list of them that are included in your packet.
Could you talk a little bit about what the criteria was and how those transfers happened, just from the administration? Because we've been asked by other departments, why weren't we included as a line item versus a grant? And just at a high level, if you could speak to the
Yeah, I could probably get you a better detailed answer coming back, but in general, we work with the grants office on just identifying those community grants that are essentially base services, that are services that I think somewhat the thought is this is stuff we would provide whether it was a community grant or not. So it makes sense to be part of our base budget because if the community grant went away, we'd want to continue providing this. Or stuff that sort of lines up with other services that are in the base budget. That's sort of at a high level, one of the criteria is it's essentially every service area identifies and looks at them, works with our contracts team, and then works with the grants office of the county to sort of identify which ones make sense each year.
I appreciate that. I think a little more specificity. I'm not expecting it right now, and this crosses over into our colleagues in the GO committee, but we're constantly being asked because, just again for context, the standard practice of previous county executives had been, unless there are unusual circumstances, to not place a grantee as a direct line item. But this county executive, and it's his prerogative, has chosen to have a different policy and have more openness to there being line items, which have pros and cons, by the way. But just that would be helpful to be able to communicate that.
Okay, so we'll go with section D, which is the service consolidation hubs. There is a recommendation from the executive that they be supported through county general funds in the amount of $3 million. So the hubs really started during COVID, focusing on food distribution, home deliveries, and other support and social services. FY23 funding was for 8 different locations. So the FY24 funding is recommended for 7 locations for the $3 million. So this is one of those programs that is shifting from being ARPA funded to recommendation of shifting to county general dollars for FY24. And HHS provided some background and service information on the consolidation hubs. On average, the hubs serve around 6,250 families weekly in food services. And then as we go to the next chart on page 9, there is detail about the FY23 approved amount for each of the hubs and the FY24 recommended amount. So staff wanted to note that funding for the Oak Chapel Hub was not included in FY24. So when Oak Chapel Hub was funded in FY23, there was a kind of a special funding or special funds requested by one of the council members at the time that was approved to help support the Oak Chapel Hub. HHS is supporting the county executive's recommendation, and that we and that they maintain the 7 hubs and not include Oak Chapel for FY24. I'll note that the Oak Chapel leadership submitted correspondence that they would like to continue the food allocations program, and so they have made that request. So council staff recommendation is to support the executive's recommended FY24 funding level for the 7 hubs at $3 million.
I've got Councilmember Sales followed by Councilmember Lukey, and I have some thoughts on this too. Councilmember Sales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I see that the $300,000 that was originally allocated to Oak Chapel was not included into the final total to be absorbed into the 2 additional hubs that will now absorb that particular location. How will you accommodate for the amount of food that's being provided for those almost 400 households that will be?
So the amount of food is it's really the next item in the budget is a lot of the food that goes towards the hubs. It's divided among the hubs. So whatever amount of food is allocated would, instead of being divided among 8, divided among 7. So theoretically, if we had the same amount of food, that's not what's proposed in the budget. If we had the same, it would just be shifted to the other locations. So that is how it would be handled.
So what happens to the 300,000? That's not just staff costs.
That's primarily just staffing cost, administration costs for those managing the hub. The food costs are a separate part of the budget.
Okay.
That's not part of the $300,000.
So are we going to increase the amount of staff at the other 2 locations to accommodate for this loss? Or is that not part of the plan?
That's not part of the plan.
Okay.
It might be helpful if you could maybe just speak a little bit to what some of the other staff, what is in those allocations and what the staff do at those hubs? Because some of the other services that are provided centrally by the department. Is that accurate?
Right. Some of the case management is provided centrally by the department, largely through different case management contracts. So those will just be reallocated and redistributed to the other hubs. So that would still continue at the same total level as it is in this year's budget. The other services, the different hubs have different needs and uses of the funding. We've chosen to do a model, if you see, where we essentially categorize the hubs as large, medium, and small, and give an appropriate amount of funding based on their size. So we don't see that the shift would necessarily change the size of the other hubs located around it. We will obviously monitor it and see what's going on, but that is what is proposed in the executive's budget.
Okay. And, you know, these hubs were created to address an immediate need during a time when there was an emergency. We didn't collect any demographic data. We have no zip code data. There was really no screening process and no real record keeping of any data of who we're actually serving. And now that that provision's been lifted, it would be helpful to revisit collecting data. It's helpful to know what zip codes are being served, what households, because as we're looking forward, you know, resources are going to be limited, and I want to make sure that the neediest among our residents are being served by these very limited resources. And so is that something that can be implemented in the upcoming fiscal year to ensure that next year when we're coming back we can see who are we actually still supporting and what other provisions are being made to better consolidate the services to accommodate residents who are taking advantage of these food hubs. So.
Sure. Thank you, Councilmember Sells, for those comments, and that's part of the plan. I mentioned earlier that, you know, the goal, the aim of the Department of Health and Human Services now is to provide person-centered approach, a holistic approach, but also look at data. This council has asked a lot of questions about data. And our approach going forward will be data-driven, and we will evaluate the effectiveness of these programs. We know that as dollars continue to dry up, we really need to do an assessment of the impact, community level impact, not only on individuals, children, but families. And so this is one strategy that we have going forward to evaluate and also to assess the impact. We can determine better outcomes through this process, and if we need to realign those capabilities, those services, this is one vehicle that we can use. So yes, we are moving in that direction. We are listening to council and this committee as far as meaningful use of data and how we can use those data to identify targeted strategies and our services.
Good, because I know we haven't gotten to it yet, but I know we're going to talk about the initiative to end childhood hunger. And so as we're thinking about the current resources and what strategies will be recommended later on, this will be very helpful in seeing how we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lukey.
Yeah, I just, it was my understanding that the Oak Chapel site, that there wouldn't really be a negative impact by closing that one because there were other services available nearby, so that they would not be, you know, disproportionately impacted. I just want to confirm that that is in fact the case.
Yeah, we wouldn't say that there's no impact to it, but it will be minimal. There is 2 other services within 5 miles. The majority of the people who go to the Oak Chapel do attend via vehicle, not walk up, so that we see that there would be minimal impact. People should be able to get services from other nearby hubs.
And that was the smallest site that we had
Yeah,
of,
it only
of all
serves
of
one
them.
zip code.
Right.
Yes.
And you know, I know that, like, for example, the Up County hub got state funding for new cold storage, right? So there are, and I don't know, I didn't, that's in my district, so I looked, but I don't know about, you know, other ones, whether they also got some other state funding for more durable goods that will assist with the operations in dealing with food security in the future. But that was my expectation, that everybody was trying to build that out. And again, working with our new Food System Resiliency Office to help make sure we have appropriate locations, culturally competent locations throughout the county to serve all of the residents who have these needs. And, you know, while again, I was certainly understanding funding disappearing and ARPA funding disappearing, but this is a critical area that has been long under-addressed and exacerbated by the pandemic, and now we have an opportunity to do it right and do it right moving forward. So thank you, and I support the staff recommendations in the packet.
Great. So appreciate the comments from both colleagues, and thank you, Dr. Bridgers. This, as I said before, is one of the silver linings coming out of COVID, because it presents a new service delivery model that extends the county's reach in a really meaningful and authentic way. I agree with Councilmember Sales that the next phase of this has to be the tracking of information and data, and then cross-reference that with the Office of Food Resilience, with a number of the other services that we are providing, so that we're not flying quite as blind as we have been. But credit to the amazing community leaders that in most instances started these organically, and that includes Oak Chapel. There was a tremendous effort, community-driven, to establish something that didn't exist before, and that really was powerful in meeting a need. I concur with this transition, acknowledging HHS tried to do this transition last year, but as Jason mentioned, there is an impact, and we have to acknowledge that there are people who worked really hard to get this very important program off the ground, and understandably feel a sense of loss that it's being transitioned. But I do have every bit of confidence that we will honor and recognize the work of these extraordinary leaders by continuing their work, but just in a different way. I have been told by one of our colleagues who did not have something ready for prime time today that we may be getting a memo or a request to reconsider Oak Chapel specifically, but there isn't anything before us at this moment. And so I concur with colleagues in their staff recommendation, in following through with the staff recommendation as presented.
Thank you, Councilmember Alvarez. So we'll move on to the next section, Section E, Food Staples Program. The County Executive has recommended $6.15 million in county general funds to support that program. I'll talk about the funding distribution a little bit later. But so this program started during COVID. It is DHHS partners with Capital Area Food Bank and Manna Food Center, and they distribute food to over 80 local providers in the area. So the food staples funding in the budget has been listed as a one-time item. However, it was funded in FY23 with general funds. So it's been one of those one-time items that has been reoccurring during COVID. So today, the council has approved over $45 million in emergency food assistance since June of 2020. I will call attention to FY23 that the council originally approved $4 million during this exercise for FY23, and then later on in the year there was a special appropriation of $8 million for a total funding of $12.2 million in county general funds for FY23. DHHS estimates that the food staples program supports upwards of 60,000 people weekly. So the council staff recommendation is to support the $6 million, but we did split it up. That there's $3.15 million in high priority, and we said $3 million in regular priority. This would just give the HHS committee and DHHS an opportunity to get started with the program and then come back in September, as they did with other appropriations, and let us know where the program is at. But this recommendation of the split of the funding is also tied to bullet number 3 under council staff recommendation, that there is a request that DHHS and OFSR develop a sustainable program model to be shared with council for review in September 2023. So really similar to what Councilmember Sales detailed about the request for the service consolidation funds, is that both of these programs kind of be looked at and come back and recommend a long-term program option. So the recommendation is to, I would say, for staff to fund the $6.5 million split into high priority and priority.
Okay, without objection. That one was fast.
Yes. So I'll call attention to the Food Access Call Center. I'll just say that the center was closed on December 31st, 2022. There's detail in the packet about why DHHS took those steps, and there are still ways to call in MC311, but I think they said the volume of calls diminished, they didn't see the need for like a dedicated line. Okay. And I think this is our last item for admin, is item F. So this is the Office of the Chief Administrative Officer, administrative staff needs, and also needs relating to the coding unit, but all of the staff is under the CAO office. So, so we'll break this up. The administrative request increase is for 4 new staff. This is really to deal with the increased volume of the administration functions, contracts, HR that the department alluded to. So there is including of 2 program managers, 1 administrative specialist, and 1 fiscal assistant. And so DHHS also provided kind of like they called it their administrative burden summary, sharing the volume or number of contracts and people dedicated to this work. So from FY21 through FY23, you can see the number of FTEs, the number of contracts that have been consistently increasing. And in this conversation just today, we have talked about more contracts that are shifting over to DHHS, which the staff in that office would have to manage. So I will stop at that point, maybe just to talk about the needs of the administrative staff, and then we'll go into the coding.
Just one clarification. It's a mistype. I don't know if we sent over. It's FY11 to FY22. We didn't double in number of contracts in 1 year. It's a overtime increase. So the first number is FY11, the first column. Yeah.
Thank you. I just want to make sure. So, and then the coding unit we would add 2 new program specialists and 1 office service coordinator. So the coding unit is particularly related to Medicaid billing and coding. We know that is an extensive process that you might have to go to school for and train for. And so the staff here notes all of the impacts. This coding unit is for all of DHHS and trying to bill and manage the Medicaid revenues that they're trying to gather. There is going to be a total offset for this staff that you could see in the budget chart that is detailed. So the FY24 recommended costs are $375,000. They're estimating revenue at around $800K. So a net cost to us, or a net benefit to us, of $423K. So council staff is supporting the executive's recommendation to of the $375,000. And also, because all of these additions were going to be a revenue offset, we did mean to include this in the high priority item, because essentially it will be no cost to the DHHS.
I have some comments. I'm going to yield to Councilmember Lutke, and did you have anything on this? And then I'll jump in right after her. Councilmember Lutke.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that the additional positions for the coding are exclusively for medical billing or other Medicaid covered supported services. Is that right? Okay, so this wouldn't include any of the coding or billing or payment processing for nonprofit entities that have contracts to provide food services, like at the shelters or anything like that. That's handled separately. So this is only for the medical unit, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Sorry. I'm going to support the staff recommendation. I'm just going to say a couple things really quick. Losing Ms. Buckland was a huge loss. She did more than just one person's job. I know that for a fact. And I appreciate and very much understand this request, because I don't think people fully appreciate or understand the administrative work that goes behind the administration of these contracts. Literally hundreds of contracts that are delivering key services. And I'm hoping this will put us in a better position than we are currently in tracking the outcomes of those contracts. Because for the last 3 years, it's been about survival. But moving forward in this next phase, and this council is very interested, and all of my new colleagues have all said this in different ways, but essentially the same thing. We can't keep doing the same things over and over again the same way, even if there is high need. And so I do look forward to coming back to some of that administrative capacity that will hopefully be gained by these new positions and check in where we are. So, but I just wanted to note that. So without objection, we agree with the staff recommendation.
Great. So that takes us to the end of this service area. I know you had mentioned taking a 5-minute break, or we can continue on to aging and disability.
No, let's take a 10-minute break.
Okay.
So it is 3:56. We will be back at 4:06. So thank you all very much. And with that, we are going to take a quick recess right now. Thanks.
Hi, Heather. This is Tara. Hi. I just wanted to check in with you because we weren't able to touch base, but hopefully you heard that Councilmember Albanos, they pushed us our time frame right now. We're extending from 4:30 to 5:30. I just wanted to make sure you could stay. I didn't want to assume that you could stay until 5:30. Okay.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, we're in the council hearing room, so it's not the easiest to navigate. But yes, I heard you.
I appreciate it. I'll be here.
All right, we're having too much fun out there. We got to get started again. All right, do we need a countdown, Equin, or we can jump right back in? Okay, great. So we are moving on now to aging and disability.
Thank you. So starting with aging and disability, the FY24 recommended amount for the service area is $66,477,883. There is a difference of 17 FTEs, and we will talk about those in the details as we go through the service area. So again, we have our chart with our high priority and our priority. As you can see, staff has recommended that all of the proposed items be considered as high priority, and we will detail as we go through each service area why we identified them as that. So aging and disability vacancies. The area has 22 vacancies totaling 2.6 million. Of those 22, 6 FTEs have been vacant over a year, including 4 community health nurses, 1 social worker, and 1 program manager. And so the FY24 recommended A&D budget adds 17 new FTEs. All of those are dedicated to the Medicaid long-term care programs, which experience an expansion with the new state legislation. And so we'll detail those when we talk about the Medicaid long-term care programs. So council staff recommendation is the committee may want to discuss the need for the vacant positions over 1 year old. We did call out that the community health nurse vacancies are likely an indicator of the significant challenges in sustaining the county government healthcare workforce, as we have seen in other medical fields as well. So, so that is the information on the vacancies.
Dr. Bridgers?
I was just gonna let you know, of those 6 more than a year that were more than a year over at that time, 4 of them have been filled. 1 of them, a candidate has been selected, and the other 1 we're in the process of interviewing. 3 of those positions are multiple are a little misleading in that they were moved from a different area, or they were work years were increased in them, or some minor changes, and so they haven't been vacant in the current state that long. That's why they have such a long amount of days vacant. They've actually been with A&D for less than 6 months, most of them.
Thank you. See no other questions from colleagues, so we can move on.
Okay, so we will go to item B, the supplement for the developmental disability service providers. The recommendation from the county executive is a 2% increase at $405,000. This would bring the total supplement amount for the DD service providers to $20,657,100 million. Excuse me. Sorry, you guys saw the numbers. Also, I'll just say that we're also having this summary that there are also a recommendation to include $36,000 and a 0.5 FTE to support the implementation of the Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Commission. And I believe recruitment is going for it right now to bring on those new members and start the committee. In April 2023, the governor proposed in the General Assembly supported $117 million in total fund to provide a 4% rate increase in July to the DD providers, followed by an 8% increase in January 2024. So this is the part of trying to meet the statute, increasing the minimum wage by January 1st, 2024. So total increase for the DD community over FY24 of 12%, but recognizing that 8% doesn't start until January. So the interagency DDD providers is a coalition of 41 providers, and they receive approximately $295 million annually from DDA to support the 4,000 Montgomery County residents. So Interact submitted documentation discussing the program, highlighting the challenges coming out of COVID with their operations. There was a significant significant recognition or sharing of information about the staffing shortages and the challenges that they are facing with just the low rates that they receive, and they're trying to meet above minimum wage to retain staff. So the recommendation from Interact is to increase the recommended amount to 8.7%, a total funding of $22 million. This amount is $1.3 million more than the amount in the county executive's March 15th budget. Interact cites that the 8.7% is just what they need to maintain the cost of living. So it's not an enhancement. They are saying it's just what they need to maintain delivery of services. In the chart, we detailed what percentages increase would look like and what those amounts would be. So if the HHS committee recommends to go with the 2%, it would be $405,000. For the 3%, 4% respective in the chart. And then staff notes that the council received lots of testimony and letters for the increased FY 2024 DD supplement amount at 8.7%. The council staff recommendation is to support the executive's recommended amount at $405,000. And we just did put a bullet in there recognizing that there is anticipated increase for providers' rates that is happening in FY24, and it would be great to hear back from the DDD providers in spring 2024 to hear about that impact.
Thank you. I've got a lot to say about this. So first, I want to recognize and thank our DD providers. What they do is extraordinary, and this is not a service that the county is in a position to be able to provide on its own. And so we have relied upon these outstanding community-based organizations for a number of years now. And I think all of us have had the opportunity at some point or another to visit these organizations. And all of us have seen firsthand the love and the care that they provide, not just the direct clients that benefit from the services, but by extension, their families. And the heartbreaking stories that we hear about so often from families who are so concerned about their children, especially as they age, and what they will be doing, what they can provide them. So this to me falls in a different category of service because it's not something that is easily supplemented by some other service. What we have, and we are so fortunate to have them, is who we have doing this work. And I found their testimony and the conversations I've had to be particularly compelling given the needs. And in the recruitment and retention space in particular, for individuals who are willing to do this work, it's back-breaking work. It's really hard. And oftentimes it's exhausting on a number of different levels. And so I do concur that I believe we need to go above and beyond the 2% for at least conversation to compete with everything else, including within HHS's budget. But that it's something we should at least consider. And I would be interested in supporting an increase of 4 rather than 2%, but we should have both tranches or none, depending on where colleagues are on this. But I would propose adding 2% to the 2% that the county executive has proposed, and this would be a high priority for me. Councilmember Lukey.
I would put the executive's recommendation of the 2% and staff recommendation of the 2% on the high priority list, and any addition that others want to discuss could be on the priority list. But I understand and appreciate why we've done the supplement in the past, specifically because of the cost of living, but then knowing that the state is increasing the amount of money that's going to come in order to be in alignment with the updated minimum wage law that has just passed, and knowing that there was a substantial increase right before, given our situation, and knowing that if we bless everything, we will start FY25 with a $145 million structural deficit. I feel like the high priority should be going with the county executive's recommendation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Council Member Sales.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I concur with the increased recommendations based on the work that's being provided to this community. I would also mention that our own minimum wage is going to be increasing, and so there is going to be maybe a 6-month gap between when the county's minimum wage increases to when the governor's amount kicks in. And so I would be willing to also put this in a high priority category, and would be willing to match what the community is requesting up until the end of the 2023 fiscal year. And I don't know what that would calculate to. If we did it to the 6%, which is what I believe they requested, if we do it just until the end of the year instead of the full fiscal year, if that would be possible till the governor's increase kicks in with the 8% addition. I don't know if we can calculate that. That's different from what.
So, yeah, let me just clarify. So I'm hearing the committee support recommendation for the executives 2%, then an additional 2%, and then also half a year of the additional 4%. I'm sorry, I just want to be clear. So I'm hearing you.
I believe the recommendation was at 6%, if I'm not mistaken.
The providers would request, I believe, an additional 6% on top of the 2.
Yes.
So and I believe you're saying then that you would advocate or
for an
support
additional 4%. In addition to, I think
so
Chairman
2%,
Alvarez said
2%.
an additional 2, and I would say 4
For 6 months.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. We can figure out the number that goes with that.
Okay. Thank you.
And I got to turn my light on. Okay, great. Okay.
It's a long day.
That's right.
I think we've got it, and we can bring the numbers back to the committee at your final review.
Awesome. Thank you. Next.
Okay, we'll move to Section C, Adult Medical Daycare Supplement. The recommendation from the executive is a 2% increase of $42,315 to bring the total supplement amount to $2.158 million. So in your packet, it details the history of the supplements with the adult medical daycare provider community. In FY19, we started with $651,000. That was the first year that we did the support for those payments. It happened in FY19 and FY20. In FY21, there was not an appropriation, and in FY22, there was an appropriation for $670,000. So in FY23, there was a significant increase of $1.4 million over the FY22 base as the adult medical daycare community was emerging out of COVID. Their facilities have been closed for quite some time, so for them staffing up and trying to provide the services to residents was needed. The adult medical, the Maryland Association of Adult Medical Care Services submitted information and supported the county executive recommendation of $42,315 for FY24. But we also laid out increases in the supplements examples as we did with the DD community. So the 2%, the 3%, or 4%, and anything above, we can certainly provide you that information.
So again, speaking for myself, I'm going to support the staff and the county executive's recommendation for the additional 2%. And I'll just underscore once again, as I have before, what an opportunity now and moving forward adult medical day programming is. There are a lot of conversations happening in a lot of families right now about how and when we're going to take care of our elders. And there is more need and demand than there are services and programs available. And there's a missing middle as we look at providing services for our aging community. There are high-end programs and services available. There are also a number of support services provided by a number of agencies, not enough of them. But a lot of families fall in this middle category of not quite having enough to take advantage of these high-end resources. And so I think it's important for us to explore this further, and I've just grown to really appreciate the work that this organization and this group does, and so that's where I am. Councilmember Lutz.
It's really important to note, though, that this isn't just for our aging population, right? So, whereas individuals with developmental disabilities have their own unique, highly specialized needs, which is why they're in a separate category, adult medical daycare goes down to age 16 and applies to a wide range of ages, and yet the needs are significant. So thank you, Councilmember Albornoz, and yes, I concur with the staff recommendation and the county executive's recommendation.
So without objection.
Thank you. Staff did want to call attention that the FY24 recommended budget includes grants to organizations for supporting people with disabilities. So, of course, not a part of the aging and disability budget. However, we did want to note that this grant opportunity will be available for community organizations. It's possible that some of the organizations under the developmental disabilities providers could apply for and be awarded grants. So we just wanted to note that, and that would just be more support for that community. So for the next items, I'll say E, F, and G. They consist of the Autism Waiver Program, the Adult Evaluation and Review Services, and Community First Choice Program. So all of the programs identified here are Medicaid long-term services and support programs. They operate on waivers. And so I'm just going to talk about them all together. So for the three programs, there is a significant increase in staff. So there's 10 FTEs for the Autism Waiver Program. For ARS, 6 FTEs, and for Community First Choice, there's just an increase just based on program demand. All of the, collectively, these programs do have a Medicaid revenue offset. So if you'll see in the chart under the Autism Waiver Program, that the expectation is that there will be revenue in terms of that. There won't be much net cost, cost to county government. As you'll see in the Autism Waiver section, the expansion of the program, the net cost will end up being $178. But if you go to the adult evaluation and review programs and also the community first programs, those are a net cost of $0. So in general, these programs were, the increase that we're seeing is based on the SB 636, a legislation at the state level, the End the Wait Act. So during the FY 2022 legislative session, SB 636 was passed. This bill requires MDH to reduce the waiting list for several home and community-based waiver programs, including the Autism Waiver Registry, by 50% in FY 2024. I believe the target date is January 2024. So, for example, I think this program, I think the legislation has the biggest impact on the Autism Waiver Program in terms of MDH's approaches. MDH's plan is that all children and families on the autism waiver list will be seen in FY24, or their application, they will be pulled off the wait list. So it's a very ambitious goal. Right now, our Autism Waiver Program has 333 clients. I believe they said they're adding around 53 next month, which would be this month. And right now, there are 1,400 persons on the autism waiver wait list. So in FY24, at least 50% of those names will be pulled down, and that those people will need to then be enrolled in the program. So this speaks to the increased staff, just because there is going to be increased demand. So in general, for the first FTE, the first summary you see here, there are 2 new FTEs dealing with the increased staff just because of the demands of the program, even as it is right now with the 333 clients we serve. And then in anticipating the new clients that will come on, and then also case managing those staff. There's an additional 8 FTEs, 7 program specialists, and 1 program manager. So I focused on the autism waiver program just because it's a majority of the changes, but AERS and Community First Choice are also impacted by SB 636, and so there is a focus for all of those waiver programs to reduce that wait list and get folks enrolled in these programs by January. So our recommendation is to support the funding for the various programs as recommended by the county executive.
All right. I think without objection, I should have said this up front. Ms. Clemens Johnson has a remarkable work history. She's done a lot of really interesting things, but this is her first full staff budget packet, and you're doing an outstanding job. Really appreciate you. It's seamless.
Seems like a veteran.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then I think our last item is the senior care grant area on agency. It's something that we get annually to operate the area on agency, and so because it's a grant, we didn't include it in the reconciliation list. So if there's any questions, staff can answer those. Okay, and then we have one consent item as a Medicaid long-term care staff. An increase of FTE, I believe, is to have oversight of all of the Medicaid waiver programs that we're talking about. And so we have listed that as a consent item, and that would be the last item for the A&D service area.
All right. Without objection.
Was there a line salary for that, or just the position of the position?
Councilmember Sales is asking if there's a line item salary for that.
A line item salary is built into the multi-program adjustments, and so maybe if you.
I believe it's just really a position moving from one area to another. It's not a net increase to the salary overall of the county. It's just we reallocate positions based on need often within our budget, and it's just recognizing one of them.
Great. I'll just note before we wrap up aging and disability, we've got a senior summit that's being planned in October, which I'm really excited about, and a lot of the programs and services we're talking about through the lens of the budget will be discussed, and more importantly, the current long-term needs, so that we can do some strategic planning and development. So, and Dr. Brunetto, as always, thank you for your continued leadership. Great. All right, so that moves us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the FY23 supplemental appropriation, Department of Health and Human Services COVID-19 emergency response in the amount of $15,909,513.
Yes, so the next is a supplemental appropriation 23-91. So this supplemental was sent by the county executive on March 15th in the amount of $15,909,513 for the for COVID-19 pandemic emergency expenses. So the executive transmittal notes that these costs were not included in the FY23 operating budget, and that the county will seek to get reimbursement from FEMA for all of the eligible expenditures. In your packet, there are details the services and goods that equate to the $15 million. I would say the largest area here is for the PCR testing, and also for the COVID motel expenses and other motel expenses. Their council staff recommends approval of the supplemental appropriation, and we have requested that the county executive and DHHS provide any other detailed information to share about what this supplemental consists of and how they will expend the funds.
I believe Councilmember Lukey has questions.
Yes. So the expenditures these were already incurred, correct? So they are what is now being shown now, but from the second quarter of fiscal year 23. Is that right?
They're the expenses we expect for the entire fiscal year of this fiscal year.
So for the remainder of this fiscal year?
Yeah, we don't expect to do any other supplemental related to COVID.
Okay. And so the testing, the $5 million for testing, and the $5.5 million for the motel and expenses and other motel and expenses, are those being terminated moving forward since there won't be FEMA funding to seek reimbursement from on that?
The PCR testing has been winding down. I think that's part of the problem. There is I'm not. I believe with the public health budget we'll be discussing, there is money set aside for COVID in the both SEF and public health budget, and so there's portions that will continue.
Right.
And that is some of the moteling is listed in the SEF budget.
Okay.
But for the testing, we are, I believe, planning on shifting mainly to rapid testing and minimizing the use of PCR testing.
Gotcha.
It's already gone way down. I believe
Yeah.
Dr. Bridges can
Sure.
speak a lot more about
Thank
it.
you, Councilmember Lukey, for that, for those questions. Yes, we are transitioning again, but looking at some of the costs that we wanted to get reimbursed for, but we will continue our effort to maintain our great numbers. And so you will see some of that explained and demonstrated in our public health service areas. So the answer to your question is yes. For those services, we are shifting again the model to look at more rapid testing.
Right.
To get an immediate response, but we
Right.
know in certain areas PCR testing are going away, and it will be folks will have to pay for that, and so we have part of that in the service area plan as well. But these are dollars that we are trying to supplements that we have for FY23 that did have these listed costs. So yes.
And these are all items that are covered under the scope of what FEMA is reimbursing for?
I'm looking at everything. I believe everything should be covered under what FEMA is reimbursing for.
Okay.
We never know until FEMA actually reimburses, but all of these are in categories that theoretically FEMA will reimburse for.
Yes, I guess the better way of asking it is there any reason that you would suspect that anything that is appearing on this list or any documentation that you have related to these items would be rejected for reimbursement by FEMA at this time?
No, clearly the vaccination, testing, and the non-congregant sheltering are eligible expenses. Some of the outbreak nurse and stuff that are always iffy with how they're categorized. That's the only one that I could see some possible concern with, but it's all, we will seek to maximize however much we can in FEMA submission.
Okay, thank you.
And so, Councilmember Lukey, just to add, we have data to support all of these categories so that we can enumerate and list and respond to any reimbursement questions that may come from the feds.
Yep. I know they like to send them. I know. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll just note something, and I'll repeat something Councilmember Sales said in a previous session, but it's relevant to this discussion. Motels and hotels, obviously it got us through a really tough time. But there's, in fact, I'm going to yield to you so you can ask. I don't want to steal your thunder. Councilmember Sales.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to ask, that's $5 million that we're anticipating costs associated with motels and other expenses. Can you explain what this category entails, what this is being used for, and which organizations are getting the funds, or if they're going directly to these motels?
They're going directly to the motels along with associated costs for housing people in motels, such as security. There was some food costs and cleaning costs, especially for the COVID motel. So it's sort of a mix, but it's all related to the providing of the hoteling.
I know, but for who?
It's for people who it's essentially overflow for our shelters. There's the COVID one is for those who are either COVID positive or exposed to COVID. The other one is for those who are vulnerable, the most vulnerable population. It's not our shelters are generally at maximum capacity. So in order to shelter them somewhere, in order to not it makes sense to separate those who are the most vulnerable. We have sought to do that through using the motels, especially as they are FEMA reimbursable for non-congregant sheltering.
Okay, I'm just wondering what's going to happen after this year with regards to this budget line item.
I believe
I think we are assuming half of the COVID motel and expense amount in the 24 budget. So we're not assuming the same level of that need.
And the other motel.
I think the other motel we're assuming.
Yeah, it's in the SEF, so when we get to the SEF budget, it'll be laid out very clearly, but we are expecting it to continue, but obviously, as with all of the stuff, the levels are being reduced especially in the COVID level, the level of homelessness isn't necessarily being reduced because COVID is going away. So that still will be at a similar level, maybe slightly less, but that will be addressed in the CEF budget when that is brought up.
Okay, thank you. I yield.
Thank you. And to follow up, so this is complicated because you mentioned security, safety issues, and not all of the hotels or motels were equipped to be able to handle the long-term stays that we ended up seeing, which were unanticipated. And we were all just running 100 miles per hour, doing our best. But upon reflection and moving forward, clearly we do need to track the appropriateness, generally speaking, of hotel and motel use, but acknowledging sometimes it's our least worst option, but also which facilities are in better positions than others. Not just who's willing to serve, but who's in a better position to be able to serve our county clients moving forward. Because we receive lots of constituent calls, all of us, especially during COVID, from people complaining about conditions and challenges within some of these facilities. So it's something we'll have to explore further down the line, but I'm glad we're having this conversation now. So I think without objection then, colleagues? Take the recommendation, yes. All right, that takes us to the last item today, which is a discussion regarding the Office of Food Systems Resilience. And I believe Ms. Bruskin is calling in for this one.
I am present, yes.
Great.
Sorry I can't be with you in person, but I appreciate the chance to join virtually.
No problem, and we're wishing you a speedy recovery.
Thank you very much.
I know you are not feeling well.
That's quite all right. Glad to be with you. Thanks for making the time.
Yes, we can go ahead and get started. Ms. Clemens Johnson.
Thanks so much. So we are discussing the Office of Food System Resilience. This is a new office that began in FY23 with support from the County Council and County Executive. The office did not become operational truly until the director, Ms. Perskin, was hired in March 2023. But during the time of FY23, there was funding in the Office of Food System Resilience to support several of the programs. And that support did go on throughout the fiscal year. So on the chart on page 2 of your budget, we talk about the FY23 amount versus the FY24. This is really just a shift of funding, not any new funding except for just some small increases in the annualization of personal costs and general wage adjustments and such. But in just reference FY23 again, is that the operating funds did support food insecurity priorities, included the Market Money Program, gardening grants, Farm to Food Bank, and the strategic plan to end childhood hunger. And so I know Heather will go through the details of the strategic plans of the office, but in short, just that DHHS will continue to provide the contract monitoring services for all of the contracts that are within OFSIR. They are hiring so the office consists of 3 staff. They are currently hiring for the 2 staff, and as I noted in the packet, that it is a term position, but the HHS staff talked about how those term positions go, so they'll likely be ongoing. So DHS will continue the contract monitoring services, and the OFSR is really looking forward to the strategic planning, program coordination, contract development, and community partnership and vendor engagement support with DHHS. So the OFSR initiatives will focus on long-term strategic planning, likely into FY25, and for the county's food security investment and implementation of current policies, like we talked about the strategic plan to end childhood homelessness. We'll say one of the focus areas that the Office of Food Security has identified is developing a long-term county government framework for financial sustainability and strategic investment in food security programs and partnership that center on equity, efficiency, and effectiveness. So I think The council as well as the executive are eager to see the work that comes out of the OFSR. The recommended budget is $1.1 million for next year. This will support the current programming and allow the office to officially launch their planned programs and initiatives. There is a recommendation from staff that there be an update within 6 to 9 months into FY24 about what's going on with the OFSR, and particularly that in conjunction with the DHHS, there should be a proposed operating and administrating sustainability plan. It's kind of the same message that we've been saying throughout the food programs, is to pretty much come back with a program plan and what does it look like to support food insecurity moving forward with all of the different programs that currently exist. So that's it for us.
Thanks. I'll just make a couple comments before turning it over to Ms. Bruskin and then colleagues who may have questions or thoughts. The first is another silver lining that came out of the pandemic was the incredible public-private partnership that occurred specifically within the food insecurity space. And obviously the Food Council had already been established, but it was really the coordination with our Office of Emergency Management and the Department of Health and Human Services that we took things to a scale that we had never really seen before. And we were able to dramatically expand our reach working collaboratively together, and we're able to get the money we were getting from the federal government out the door more quickly and more strategically than most other jurisdictions as a result of that. And so one of the key outcomes of that was the need for us to continue that work and not go back to where we were, so that organizations have the information and data and coordination they need. And it's county government that is in among the better, probably the best position to serve in that role, in that support role, in that coordination role, working with the Food Council, working with Capital Area Food Bank, MANA, and all the providers. So, and this, of course, is an annualization, although technically it's new. It's just an extension of what had been started previously in the middle of the fiscal year. And I have a high degree of confidence in Ms. Bruskin in particular. She's the perfect person to lead this newly formed office and get it up and running much more quickly than it otherwise would. And she's already worked to establish partnerships, is establishing a great team. And so I'm particularly excited about this. And I do look forward 6 months from now to getting that update and confirming that the office is doing what we intended, which I believe it will. But we'll confirm that in the first person once they're really up and running. But Ms. Bruskin, I'll turn it over to you to make any high-level thoughts or comments or anything that you'd like to share, and then certainly turn it over to colleagues if they have any questions or comments as well. Ms. Bruskin.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to be here today, and thanks to all of the committee members for your consideration of this budget request, and much appreciation to Ms. Clemens Johnson as well for all of her support navigating this process, and our partners at OMB as well. So as you mentioned, I hope that we will have the opportunity to, once our strategic plan for the OFSR is officially launched and our team is fully staffed, that we can come and connect with council on our overall priorities for this new opportunity. But just sharing a little bit about what we envision for the first few months. We do have both positions, one focused on data and one on community engagement and on policy practice and implementation. Are actively in the process of recruitment, and so we should have the opportunity soon to get to introduce you to our new colleagues. But the focus really will be first on doing a thorough landscape analysis of all of the county's programs, investments, the data that we have, the data that we're missing, to really fully understand where we are, because it's very difficult to develop strategies without full knowledge of where things currently exist. And we're in a very important time as a county where we have greater needs potentially than we've ever seen before in terms of our food security levels and other challenges related to climate change and our economic opportunities. But we also have dwindling resources from state and federal sources. And so it's more important than ever to use data analysis and strategy to leverage our county's resources, both financial programs as well as our infrastructure and other assets to to really build systems and build a stronger system, or build a stronger food system for future crises. So I've had over 100 meetings in the first 2 months of the office to connect with agencies across county government, as well as community partners, members of the private sector, businesses, and the philanthropic community. So I think there's a lot of great connections that we can build on, and looking forward to sharing more as our plans progress. But really looking forward to partnering with a wide variety of agencies and our council to explore policy strategies, investment strategies, data, and collaboration specifically around building resilience in our food system. So happy to answer any questions that you might have. Hopefully the budget is relatively straightforward, but again, thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Colleagues? No? No? All right. I think without objection then, we will go with the staff recommendation. And come back in 6 months and to review. But in the short term, thank you all very much for your work. So I said 5:30, but we were able to end earlier than that. So thank you all very much. And now I think we've got sort of a rhythm to how this is going to look moving forward. So anticipate a lot of the similar questions and thoughts, but thank you all very much. And with that, our first HHS Budget Committee session is adjourned. Thank you.